It's that time of the week. Yes, this week's Cult Movie Show, your weekly look at cult movies. Please welcome your hosts, Warren and Velvet.
Yes, it is that time of the week again. It is the Cult Movie Show with myself, Warren, and with me, as always, in the virtual studio is Velvet. How are you today, Velvet?
I am doing so amazing. We have such a fun mixture of movies tonight. We got 2 comedies and a horror, and we got a funny mini movie, which is super mini, but I couldn't resist it. But yeah, it's going to be, so I think it's going to be a lot of laughs.
It is. It's going to be a fun one. And I suppose we should explain to everybody what we are doing this podcast. It was, of course, Australia Day on the 26th of January. And so, of course, you know, obviously there's an Australian connection with this show. Yeah, just surprise, surprise, there is. So we thought we might do an Australia Day special. And so this podcast will only be doing Australian movies. So, yeah, just something a little bit different, you know, because, you know, it's good to, you know, mix it up a little bit and all that sort of thing. So all our movies are from Australia, and we've actually got quite a good range because we've got one from the 70s, one from the 80s, and one from the 90s.
Yeah. And also, one of the Australian films, well, they're all Australian, but one of them is actually a really well-known one that I remembered from my childhood. And I was like, when we were trying to figure out films, I was like, God, what am I going to pick? And then I was like, oh my God, that's an Australian film, isn't it? Because, you know, like when you're a kid, you don't realize this shit. And then you get older and you're like, oh, wait,
and you suddenly realize.
I was like, that's an Australian movie. And I was like, we have to do this one.
Now, of course, this being the Cult Movie Show, there are, of course, some incredibly iconic Australian films that we could have looked at. You know, things like The Year My Voice Broke, Picnic at Hanian Rock, Gallipoli, Kokoda, you know,
Mad Max?
Well, Mad Max is a little bit different. I was actually talking about the big mainstream blockbusters, you know, which have written themselves sort of into history, if you like. But of course, that's not really totally what we're about here at this show. You know, we talk about the cult movies which have become cult, but definitely weren't huge blockbusters at the time, or,
right.
you know, or, you know, were very cheaply made, you know, and all that sort of thing. Although the very first movie we're going to talk about definitely was very cheaply made, but it became a huge cult classic literally day one from its release in the cinema. So it's maybe a little bit different, but, you know, we'll talk about all that in a minute. So should we get started, Velvet?
Let's do it.
Let's do it. So, first cab off the rank, and it is from 1997, and it is called The Castle. And it's not actually a horror film, as you might think, with the name The Castle. This is actually a really, really interesting, fun comedy, and honestly, it's also just a very interesting look at Australia. Well, 20 years ago now, actually. You know, it's actually, but I think it's actually aged incredibly well, considering, you know, how old this movie now actually is. Now, its title comes from the old British term that a person's home is their castle. And it deals with a family that live in the very, very working class area of Melbourne, in the what's known as the northwestern suburbs. And this family lives in one of the poorest areas that there really are in Melbourne, where they are living next to the Melbourne airport. And they're not just living next to the airport, they are literally only about 20 feet from the end of the runway. That's how close they actually are. And they're not the world's brightest people, shall we say. They're not the world's most educated people, but as we will find out as this movie progresses, they are some of the world's kindest people with hearts of gold. And, no matter how badly they're treated, there's just no anger in their hearts. They are, really good people. Would you agree with that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, this was just a very cute, simple family. And that's actually what I liked about this movie. With so many movies, the characters are either have a tragic backstory, or they're very complicated characters, or they're very eccentric. These were really just simple, hardworking people. And I was just like, oh, this is so, you could instantly connect with them. They were just so endearingly simple, endearingly, honestly, also a little endearingly delusional about how simple their surroundings were. Anybody else, I could never live right fucking next door to an airport runway. That would just kill me. I would blow my brains out. I just could not handle the noise every fucking day. But they were just like, this is great. Anytime we want to go on a trip, the airport's just right over there.
And where they literally actually walked from the terminal of the airport to their front door with the trolley. They actually take the trolley home. I know. But anyway, we should explain a little bit about what the movie is about. And so it's about this this family. So obviously husband and wife and their children, who are now basically all grown up. But with the youngest one is meant to be sort of like just 18. So the kids are all grown up. And we get a bit of an insight into who the kids are, who the mum and dad are, and so forth. And everything is, in their world, perfect. It's poor. There's no doubt that it's poor, but it's their life is simple, it's honest, it's down to earth, and they're loved and they love everybody else. And really their life is a dream come true. The way they see it is their life is basically perfection. Until one day there is a knock at the door, and they find out that their house is going to be compulsorily acquired by a government agency to expand the airport. And, of course, to them, they can't understand this. People just can't take their house. Well, of course, the law says that the government can, and they decide that they're going with their group together with their neighbours, who are also going to lose their house, to fight this compulsory acquisition. And it literally starts off in a little tiny local court and will, by the end of the film, end up in the highest court in the land, the Supreme Court in Canberra, where basically this fight becomes something that will actually change the Australian Constitution. It's an amazing, lovely little story. And the other thing too about it is that throughout the film, it's not always about the fight with the government. We also get to see little insights into the way they live, and that's the funny stuff. That's when the really funny stuff happens. Yes. And it's just brilliant. But we'll tell you a little bit stuff about behind the scenes, and then we can, the two of us will sort of talk a bit more about what we thought of it and some of the funny bits, and also some of the very poignant bits which are in it as well. And this was actually from a company called Working Dog. Now, Working Dog still exists, and they're still putting out product even today. They grew from the Melbourne University Review. So in other words, what's called undergraduate humour, basically university students who get together to do comedy skits and so forth. And they formed a show many, many years ago, and that show would grow and grow and grow, and then three of them would go off with the help of one of the gentleman's wives, to form a company called Working Dog. Now, Working Dog is made up of a guy called Santo Chilaro, Tom Gleisner, Rob Sitch, and Rob Sitch's wife, Jane Kennedy, who they met when they were working on Melbourne radio. And they formed this company. And the interesting thing about this is the way that they make and produce films is that nobody gets top billing. They all share the work and they all share the billing. They all share the profits. It's a very democratic thing. They're all friends in real life. They actually socialize with each other all the time.
Oh, that's cool.
They're really, really nice people in real life. Now, the one that was decided to actually direct the film, though, was actually Rob Sitch. And so then most of the writing was then done by Tom Gleisner. Santo Cilauro, it was then in charge of most of the cinematography, and Jane Kennedy would then be in charge of most of the music, casting, and so forth. But they would all have their says in it. Now, this movie, just to give you an idea of how much of a classic it became, they made it and shot it in 11 days on a budget of 750,000 Australian dollars.
11 days.
In 11 days it was shot.
Wow.
By the time it had stopped playing in cinemas, so this is even before it went to video release, international sales, and all the rest of it, the box office had returned $10.5 million.
Holy cow.
So
talk about profitable.
This
wow.
just gives you an idea of how big this movie actually became. So did you enjoy it?
Oh yeah, this was a really cute movie. I really didn't know what I was going into as usual. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a horror movie because it was called The Castle. I don't know why. Yeah, but yeah, for some reason you think it's going to be something really serious. But yeah, these are just really quirky characters, but that you can also relate to. They're very down to earth. I absolutely love the chemistry between the mother and the father. Like, he's always complimenting her on everything. Oh, you're cooking. Oh, you look so beautiful. Oh, yeah. And, like, she makes the ugliest fucking crafts on the planet. Like, oh, I'm going to take up pottery. And she makes the worst looking coffee mugs. And they're like, oh, those are beautiful, dear. And
I know. It's like, you should open a shop.
You should open a shop. Yeah, totally. And he was so supportive of his children. Like, his daughter was a cosmetologist. And he just thought that was the greatest thing on the planet. Like, he was praising her like she had a PhD in brain surgery. Just loving, supportive family environment. And how he's always like, he reminds me of a lot of men I've known in my life that are always starting those projects around the house and never quite finishing them. Like, okay, we're going to build a pool. Oh, well, hold on, I'm waiting until this item goes on sale, so I'm going to start building the back porch. Oh, well, hold on, we'll do that later. We've started it, but I'm waiting for these other parts to go on sale. And like the way he interacts with his kids, he has the one son that's always reading what's for sale in the local newspaper, and he's always like, oh, somebody's selling some jousting. What do you call those?
Jousting sticks. Yeah.
Jousting sticks. And he's like, oh, how much do they want for them? And he'd say the price, and he goes, they're dreaming. Try to talk them down. And it's just this random. Yeah, it was just really cute banter. Really simple story. I love how they even have a family member who's in jail for a crime. And the family is very forgiving about it. They're not like holding it over his head. They're not ashamed of him. They're just like, he made a mistake. He's paying for it. He learned from it. And he's going to be home soon. And I was like, oh, that's a really nice message. I love that they threw that character into this movie. And yeah, and I love the ending. I love the whole aspect of, basically a guy who's kind of down on his luck, like this big corporation's trying to come in and trying to just say, okay, we're just going to, here's some money. We're going to take your home, go buy yourself a new home. And he's like, no, it's not a house. It's a home. There's some things you can't buy. This isn't about money. And I love how they have kind of like, it makes me think of like the angel investors, like the people who give money to like organizations just so they can start a business. This guy was like an angel lawyer that he just comes in and he's like, here, I'm a constitutional lawyer and I'm going to help you out with this. I think we can win this. But I also love the character of, they have the friend, and that's a lawyer who's not so good at constitutional law, but he tries his best.
Well, it's the idea of their local lawyer is Dennis Denudo, right. And I love the way too. He runs his own little private private law firm, which I think is on top of a 24-hour photo developing store. And like his secretary only works Mondays, Thursdays and Fridays. And, he's nothing ever works. His photocopier is always breaking down. I love the scenes in it. Just whenever we cross to the lawyer's office, he's always there with he's got the photocopier in pieces, sort of going, clear tray A1. What the fuck is that? I clean tray. What the fuck? You know? And the thing is, all he does is conveyancing, like for selling houses and this sort of stuff. And he's being asked to take on the Australian government. And he's so out of his depth, you know, and
yes.
He's absolutely hilarious. But the other thing that should be pointed out is the man who actually plays the QC, the Queen's Counsel, who actually takes on the case for free in the end, is Bud Tinwell. Now, if Bud Tinwell was a huge international star. Like he had worked in Hollywood, he'd worked in Britain. He even actually did many of the voices for the Thunderbirds. You know, he was a huge sort of name, and they got him to appear in this movie, which was absolutely brilliant. But it doesn't surprise me, because Bud Tinwell, even though he was one of Australia's most famous actors of all time, he was a really down-to-earth man who just lived in the suburbs, would just go to the shops and say hi to the people who walked past. He never took fame seriously. You know, he was always he was a very down-to-earth sort of person. And so it was great. The other person that some of the international people who watch this will recognise is it stars Eric Bana.
Yeah. I saw him in there. I'm like, it's the Hulk.
Yes. You know, but this was one of Eric Bana's very first movie roles.
He's so young and he's so pudgy, so cute looking. I was just like, oh, this is before Hollywood got to him. He's not all cut and, skinny out yet. He had some healthy meat on him. But no, he looks really cute in this movie. Really small part.
It is a small part. His wife is also played by the actress Sophie Lee, who is a very well-known actress in Australia, who was really just starting her film career when this came out. She was more known as a sort of celebrity before that, and then she actually decided that she wanted to be taken seriously. So before she started making movies, she actually applied to go to acting school and actually did the 3 years, and she actually got into what's called the Surrey Hills School, which is in Sydney. And that is the second most famous acting school in the country. And she got in, and she actually did the hard yards in that school before she went out to start acting. So you've got to take your hat off to her. She could have walked into movie roles as a celebrity, but decided that she wasn't going to do it. She was going to learn how to act first. So
good for her.
Yeah. So, good for her. And she's pretty good in this, I think. She's,
totally.
Yeah, sort of playing it. And Michael Caton, of course, plays the father. And I think he just steals the movie. He is.
He's so natural in this. Yeah, he's very natural.
and of course, he brought up the saying, as you touched on before, Velvet, where whenever his son sort of says, I found this, and he says, well, how much are they asking? And he'll give him the price. And his reply is always, tell them they're dreaming. And that line now has written itself into Australian culture. It's really? So much now that if somebody if you're like, you can be in a business meeting, right, with corporate executives, and let's say somebody puts up a proposal, another one quite seriously will sort of say, Thomas, tell them they're dreaming. It has seriously written itself into Australian language now. Yeah. Nice. So it's
that's
quite
the sign
amazing.
Of a cult film when people, when the lexicon becomes part of daily speech. Yeah, that's definitely the sign of a cult film.
Oh, most definitely.
And I loved this movie. Yeah, it had me constantly just kind of chuckling and giggling and just like kind of a laugh a minute how everything's played straight, which is sometimes the best kind of comedy. Like, they're not playing for laughs. They're not like trying to be funny. It's just, this is how we live. This is what we do. This is how we talk. And it just happens to be funny to a lot of people who don't live that way and talk that way. So.
Oh, yeah. It's great. I mean, I love the way that he has the pool room. his billiards room, and of course he built the pool table himself, and so it's not flat, it's not straight, but that doesn't matter. It's not about that, and I love the way, like, for instance, when his daughter gets married to Con, who's played by Eric Bana, and they go to Bali, obviously in Indonesia, for their honeymoon, and they come back. But they're talking about it like they've just travelled the world, but they've just been to the country. They've just been to the country next door. That's it, like everybody in Australia. It's a rite of passage to go to Bali. It's a bit like Americans going to, is it Cancun or what's that big beach resort in Mexico?
Yeah.
And they come back, and like, for instance, one of the gifts they give the father is a letter opener, right? And it's meant to be this traditional Indonesian,
shaped like a
samurai sword, right? But it's a samurai sword, and not only that, it's actually packaged like it was made in China.
Yeah, it's like got the hard plastic that you need scissors to open it, and he's like, I'm not even going to take it out of the package. He's like, I'm going to treasure this forever.
I know. It's very good. But I have to ask you though, Velvet, what did you think about the idea of their holiday house that they had?
Oh yeah. It's you know what? Happiness is a choice. They chose happy, and they also pointed that out. They were like, it's not about having the fanciest and the prettiest stuff. I mean, they were really making their fortune in this movie. And I mean, it's so down to earth, and the message of this movie is really so simple and so beautiful that it really puts things in perspective. If you're having a bad day and you're pissed off because you don't have enough money for this and you don't have that, and then you watch a movie like this where it's obviously a comedy, but there's so many heartfelt messages in it, and one of them being, happiness is what you make it. You don't have to have a mansion to be happy, and that's kind of what they were like. They had this piece of shit, cheap ass land that nobody wanted, and they built a little house on it, and it's in the middle of nowhere, and it's quiet, and they're like, that's all we need. We can go here, relax, it's quiet, and we can fish.
I know.
I was like, wow, you know what? Hats off to you. Like, one man's trash is another man's treasure.
Actually,
especially in this movie.
Actually, what we're just going to do, we're just going to take a very quick break, and then we're going to be right back, if that's right. We're just having a couple of technical difficulties with Velvet's microphone. So just bear with us for a moment. We're just going to pause for 1 sec, and we'll be right back. And we're back. Yes, sorry about that. Are you with us, Velvet?
Okay, mountains of Montana, internet and phone connection at 100%.
No, that's good. You're sounding tons better now. You were just breaking up really badly there, so that's all right. But no,
did I sound like I was underwater?
Yes, it was a little bit like, well, that... They said,
oh goodness. Okay. Well, let's see. Well, I'll give you guys the summary of what I just said. Basically, about the vacation house or vacation home. One man's trash is another man's treasure in this movie, and that applies to pretty much everything in their life. They really take what a lot of people would look at as just absolute dregs, just ew, gross, who would want that? That's terrible. And they turn it into something they can use and enjoy. And I mean, happiness is what you make it, and they choose to be happy. So you got to commend this family for that in this movie, including their vacation home. It's quiet, it's peaceful, and they can fish.
And that's, but I love it because it's like because one of the reasons why that their main house is so cheap is not only is it next to the airport, it's also under high power lines, directly underneath. And but anyway, their holiday block of land is also directly under high power lines, and poor old Daryl Kerrigan, the father, can never understand why he gets this land so cheap. And it's like he just thinks he's this great business person, because he gets land so cheap. He can never work it out. But it is good because it plays with one of those ideas that, for middle-class families in Australia, it is just a dream of every middle class family to have a weekend home where, you know, basically, so on Friday night, you all pack up and you go to the second home and then you come back on Sunday night. And the thing is that they're not a middle class family. They're a working class family. And so for them to have a holiday home, this is a big deal. You know, this is, and even though it is a kit home, they're living under power lines. Yeah, you know,
he built it himself.
You know, but to them that doesn't matter. It's a holiday home, you know, and so they just feel that they're just the luckiest family in the world. And I love it when like they have their barbecue and they just incinerate the meat, and he puts the piece of meat down on Eric Banner's plate and he goes, "Now just watch out there, mate, it might be a little bit underdone." And it's ash.
The other one, he's like, okay, who asked for the medium rare? And it's, that shit's burnt to death.
I know.
Yuck.
And he keeps saying, "Oh, can't you just feel the serenity? The serenity. There's so much serenity." And then he's there and then he hugs his wife and he sort of says, "Can you smell that? Two-stroke."
And his son's like, I don't think he actually knows what serenity means. I think he just likes the word.
And their holiday house is actually set in a real place. It's by a lake called Lake Eildon, which used to be an amazing place, but after all the damming and the hydro work and all the rest of it, the lake is now often very, very low, and you can actually see that where it was more mudflat than it was lake. So you had all these houses that were built around this lake, which are now miles away from the water as the lake actually, you know, sort of lost a lot of its water. And the other thing to remember too, Australia being an arid country, lakes don't always stay full. They drain, they refill, they drain, they refill.
Right.
And so, but the thing is that the spot that they were at is called Bonnie Doon, and that is a real place. That's not actually made up. And I love the way he's got this song when they drive up there. Did you like that? He sits in the car and he says, "We're all going to Bonnie Doon."
Oh, God. I was like, and he was, and you could tell they were just like, "Please stop singing this fucking song."
Oh, no. And I love it that the youngest son, who's played by Stephen Curry, who this once again was one of his first movies. He's now a big time Australian actor these days, and he just you imagine now he's now in his 40s, you know, but obviously when he made this, he was in very early 20s, and he said, and he's sort of our narrator for the whole film. He sort of narrates the whole thing, and in fact the film starts where he actually sort of says, "This is my story," and it all starts, and but he actually makes a comment and he sort of says, Dad had a little song about the holiday house in Bonnie Doon. I have to admit, it was just a little bit repetitive.
The hairdos in this movie cracked me up. Some of the people's hairdos, the daughter, the two sons, every time it showed them, I was just like, oh my God, that hair. It just,
I know.
The daughter has the hair, because this movie's from 97, so she has kind of the 80s hairspray hairstyle, you know?
Yes.
That's kind of, it's got the 80s hangovers that, like, still some people were rocking in the 90s, in her case, late 90s, and it just cracked me up because she's supposed to be like a cosmetologist, so she should be cutting edge of fashion trends for hair, but she's already like so young and her hairstyle's stuck in the past. I mean, maybe that's something I just picked up as a woman, but even the like two sons that lived in the house, their hairdos were just cracking me up too. It's just like plaster to their forehead. It's just like,
I know it's amazing. It's like, you know, it's meant to be the late 90s, but they're still stuck in 1980s fashions. Because you know, they just don't understand. But the really interesting thing about this is that, like, for instance, Sophie Lee, who plays the daughter, I mean, you know, she was this huge TV celebrity. She had a modeling contract, you know. I mean, she was the dream, you know, of so many teenage boys and young men, you know, who just drooled over Sophie Lee. But then you see her in this movie and she looks so awkward. You know, but in real life, she was a fashion spokesmodel and all this sort of stuff. So it's really funny.
embodied the whole working class persona. Just they're really simple. They're happy with what they have. They work with what they have, and they don't really have big dreams, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It's just, we all live our lives differently, and I love that they, like I said, they always made the best of what they had, and they were happy. They were really happy with the way things were.
And one thing I was going to actually ask you a little bit about this film is, did you find that for you there were any lost in translation moments? There were things that were maybe just too localized that you didn't get?
And I thought I would. I actually didn't come across anything where I was like, what the hell is that? There was a little thing that made me giggle, but I mean, this is just because I'm American. Because they do this shit in England, too, with the court system where the fucking people in court wear those dumbass powder wigs. Those crack me up. All those crack me up so bad. I mean, anytime I see that in English films and now in Australian films, I can't. I'm like, okay, I know they're saying serious shit right now, and I'm trying to pay attention, but that wig, I can't. I can't. So, but other than that, this one I actually I didn't come across any slang where I was like, what? Or any, I actually followed on this one pretty well. So.
It's the other thing too, which might be a little bit hard for some American audiences, is that, it is in some ways marketed a bit as a family movie, but, you've got to remember, though, it's family by Australian standards, okay? So there is going to be there's a lot of swearing in this movie, okay?
Yes,
and you have to remember that is just a cultural thing. For us, we don't view that as being bad, but I know in America, walking around saying fucking shit and all that every 5 minutes is a problem for a lot of people, so.
Oh, it cracked me up when the father calls the opposing lawyers a dickhead. That made me laugh. I thought that was really funny.
And when they win and he stands up and says, suffer in your jocks.
There is, I thought it was interesting that the father actually likened his pain to the Aboriginals, but he did it in a way that was non-derogatory. He really brought it home without being insensitive or offensive. He was basically saying my home's being taken from me, and I was just like, because when he first started saying the analogy, I'm like, oh shit, is he really going there? And even the wife in the movie's like, have you been drinking? But then he brings it home and makes his point, and it's like, okay, we'll give you that. That was a good one.
I mean, it was. I mean, it's obviously it's an ongoing, never ending, it seems to be, issue in this country about Indigenous rights, and it is something that will appear in so many Australian films. And of course, it was a perfect opportunity for Working Dog to make that little political statement without it being too over the top, Right. So for instance, Michael Caton could sort of say, I know how the Aboriginals feel, I mean, look, these people came in and they took their land, and it's like, but then that was it. And then they move on. They don't make a big deal out of it. So they were able to get their point in without turning it into a political statement. And I thought I agree. I mean, there's a very similar scene in the Australian movie, which is called Tomorrow When the World Began, which a lot of people overseas don't like because they haven't read the books. It's a group of 7 books, and the very first book was turned into a movie. The reason why a lot of Americans don't like it is it's very, very similar to the movie Red Dawn, about a group of kids during the invasion of their country, and they fight back. The thing about it is the books were written about the same time as the movie was released in America, so they're not related in any way. They're totally different. But in that movie, when the kids are actually fighting the invading army in their town, there's graffiti on the wall, and it actually shows the Aboriginals having their land taken away from them by the British. And one of the stars, she's hiding, as all the soldiers are running around, and she just looks up at it, and it's just like this thing that's like, now I get it. I'm white, but now I finally get it. Now that it's happening to me, now I actually get it. So it's an interesting, it's an interesting point, I suppose, you would say. So Yeah, it's. I mean, there are some things which I suppose, will be lost in translations. That, to a lot of people, there are a lot of slang words and and things like that will be lost. But I still think people from overseas, and also
it's a universal message. Honestly, it's a universal message. Honestly, it's not a house; it's a home. Some things can't be bought. So, I mean, there's some very universal messages in there that transcend culture and even language, and even societies. I mean, we all have a concept of what home is, and we all have things that cannot be bought, with money. So, I mean, that is very well displayed in this film. It's a funny movie about a serious situation. I mean, the whole compulsory acquisition, I mean, that's a horrible thing because these people were being offered pretty generous sums of money for their homes that were honestly not worth that much, and they didn't care about that. And they even had the immigrant, what was his name, Farouk?
Oh, Farouk, yes.
Which he's an unintentionally funny character because he's just one of those characters that obviously he's an immigrant to Australia, but Australia is his home now, and he's very proud of the home he's built there. And they can't buy. Even he's like, no, I don't want to move. This is my home. I don't want your money. I want my home that I've worked for and set up here. So
he's got some classic lines which are actually which are in many ways unintentionally are actually really more poignant today than they were in 1997 when this movie was made. Because it's like, for instance, they're talking about, they sort of say, Mr. Terrigan, he always calls him Mr. Terrigan. And he keeps saying, call me Daryl, Farouk. And he goes, oh, okay, Mr. Daryl.
Mr. Daryl.
And so he says, oh, Mr. Daryl, they say my house isn't worth very much, pardon the accent, my house isn't worth very much because they say planes fly over and that makes it cheap. It makes me happy. In Lebanon, where I come from, when planes fly over, they drop bomb. Here, I feel really happy.
I like that plane better.
I know, yeah.
And that was one of those. That's a case of sad things make you laugh.
I know.
That's definitely a perfect case of that. And also the part where the corporation tries to muscle up for half a second.
Yes.
They try to send the guy over to their houses to kind of threaten them. And Farouk's like, motherfucker. Well, he didn't say it this way, but basically he was like, if you threaten me, I'll kill you.
Yes, I know. He says, so Farouk goes, oh, you're threatening me? And so, no, Farouk. Or, no, well, you threaten me, I threaten you. You try to take my house, I put bomb under your car. and then he goes, oh, so what happened, Farouk? He goes, oh, he ran away. He says, you wouldn't put a bomb under his car. And Farouk just sort of goes, oh, no, I don't know people like that, but he doesn't know that.
But he doesn't know that.
Yeah. Because it's like, here's, Farouk's like basically the Muslim refugee who's found a life, with his wife in Australia. And the thing I love about it is that he, like 99% of refugees, and this is the thing, it's like, they adopt and learn to love their new country, Right. It's right. Like, and this is the statement that they're making. Here's Farouk. He's built a home. He doesn't want it taken away from him. He's already had to run away and escape a war. Now he's built a home with his family. He doesn't want it taken away from him, right. And so it's a really interesting point, that they make. But the actor who plays Farouk is just hilarious. He does it so well.
Yeah, he's really funny.
He's really funny. Which is not surprising because he was originally a stand-up comic, so that would give you a bit of an idea why. Just there is I don't know what it's like in America, but there are a number of Muslim comics in Australia, mainly in Melbourne and Sydney, and they're very, very popular because they take the piss out of themselves and the culture they've come from.
Those are the best kind.
And so they're absolutely hilarious. They're absolutely hilarious. So yes, that was. I thought that was, I thought that was really funny. Anyway, the way they.
Yeah, no, the characters in this movie are really endearing. Like, you really like everybody except for obviously the corporation. You don't like the opposing lawyers because they're dickheads that are just trying to, be like, well, we're offering you money, and it's kind of, well, you're missing the point, dickhead. It's like.
I know. And I love the way, too, that Daryl decides that like when they send the heavy to threaten him, and his son pulls out a rifle.
Oh, my God.
Right? Pulls out a rifle, right? And you have to remember that this movie was actually filmed before the gun laws changed in Australia.
Okay. I meant to ask you about that. I was like, whoa, I thought you couldn't have guns like that.
No,
Okay,
this movie was actually filmed right about the same time it was all happening. So the thing was that they had to have a gun in the house pre-1997 wasn't that unusual. Post 1997, it's almost unheard of. So, so the thing is that it's, so he pulls out the gun and he goes, "Fuck off!" You know, he's got the gun on it. And then Daryl says to his son, "Where did you get that from?" And he goes, "Oh, Trading Post. Trading Post is like a paper, you know, where you buy and sell things." And he goes, "How much do you pay for it?" And he goes, "$120." He goes, "All right then." And then he goes, "But get rid of it." And he goes, "Don't give it away, sell it."
Sell it, exactly. Sell it.
Yeah, and that's
the Trading Post.
I know. So yeah, but that's why they sort of got. I mean, for instance, you wouldn't get away with that today. Yeah, because
I was wondering about that. I was like, yeah, that surprised me. I was like, oh shit, I thought you couldn't be running around with a rifle like that in Australia nowadays. Nowadays you can't, but evidently, but they caught it at the right time in that movie when you still could, and they made it a comedic element in the film. That's
exactly right. And I do love it too when he decides that after he's been threatened, he goes off with his son and they go to attempt to speak to the head of the corporation who's working with the government. And they're talking to him via his intercom at the front of his house by his big gates. And anyway, so he says, so the guy says, "Oh, fuck off or I'll call the police." So he goes, okay, I'll teach you. So he gets him, he's a tow truck driver. We should explain that. So he ties his tow truck up to the gates, rips the gates off the house and drags them all the way home. And anyway, the next morning he wakes up and the police officer knocks on the door. Or police sergeant, I should say, and he sort of says, "Daryl, there was this incident in South Yarra, which is a really rich part of Melbourne." And he goes, "Oh, it's nothing to do with me." And he goes, Daryl, listen to me. I saw you do it on the cameras, mate. I know it was you. Okay, I know it was you." And he goes, "But look," he says, "I sympathise with you. In fact, I'm on your side." So even the police are supporting him, And, but he says, "But it's my job. I've got to keep the law." So he says, "I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to do anything." And he says, all right, thanks, mate. And he goes, "Now, just a word of advice, move the gates out of your front garden." He's still sitting in his front garden.
Even the fucking cops on his side and telling him how to cover up his crime.
I know. But I love it. I love it later in the morning later in the movie when they're at the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in Australia, and they're there and they have to go all the way to Canberra, a different city, to go there. And they're there, and he's there and he's talking to Laurie, who's the Queen's Counsel, and which is the highest level of lawyer there is in Australia. And he's talking to him, and he sort of says, "It's not a house, it's a home." And then Dennis Denudo, the other lawyer, just sort of says, "With a fucking nice pair of gates now."
Yeah, there's a lot of just so much comedy sprinkled in this, and it's all like really good comedic timing. It just, they give you time to catch your breath, give you time to laugh before they hit you with the next joke. And yeah, it's a really nicely paced film. And I really love the characters in this film.
Oh, yeah. So look, just before we actually rate this film, should let everybody know there's a fight going on in Melbourne at the moment this house where this movie was filmed is currently up for demolition.
Oh, wow.
And there is a group of people who are trying to get the house registered on what's called the National Trust, which means it's an iconic building to Australian culture that cannot be destroyed. And there's a fight going on in the courts at the moment, actually about this. So just to let you know, that house is still standing, but may not be for much longer. So,
wow.
That's just a little thing. I don't really know if we really need to save that house, to be honest, but it's
as long as the film exists, you always have the permanent record and pop culture history. But no, that's wow. That would be cool if they get it saved though, because then I don't know. It becomes a tourist attraction.
Well, it'll be interesting. I mean, what it basically means is you can still buy it to live in it, but you're not allowed. But you're just not allowed to pull it down. is really what it means. So, yeah. But anyway, we'll see what happens with that court case. So, anyway, I reckon it's time we should rate this. We've been talking about it for quite a bit too long. So how are you going to rate this one?
Okay, so this is not the best film ever made, but it's definitely very watchable. It's just a really nice, not quite light comedy, because it does have some important universal messages, but it's so enjoyable, and I definitely recommend anybody that's, wants to check out some Australian films. This is a nice little comedy to check out, The Castle. So I'm going to give it, out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, I'm going to give it a 3.5.
Cool. Well, I am going to go a little bit higher because I adore this film, and it may be because it speaks to me a little bit more. Right. So I am going to give it. It's still got some issues. But I think that has a lot to do with the budget. I mean, as we said, 11 days. What was it? $750,000. They did this on a shoestring. So, and it was also their very first attempt at making a movie. They've made several movies after this, Working Dog, but this was their very first go. So, I'm actually going to give it 4.
Nice.
So, I reckon that's pretty cool. And if you like this film too, check out the movie that followed this called The Dish. That's really good too. This is a different type of movie, all made by the same guys and girl from Working Dog, and it's about the American moon landing. And it's about a radio transmitter dish in a place called Parkes in Australia, which was the actual transmission dish that transmitted the images of the moon landing to the rest of the world. And,
that sounds really interesting.
But what they do, even though it's a true story about what happened, they do it as a comedy. So it's another really good one to check out.
That's a cool way to do it. Yeah, I'm gonna check that out.
Yeah, called The Dish. So if you enjoyed this one, go and check that out as well. All right, we will take a quick break, and we'll be right back with that special time of every podcast.
Pussy.
It's time to get excited, short film fans. It's mini movie review time.
Yes, it is. And that wasn't Godzilla. That was Velvet.
Sorry about that. My 4-legged child came over for some attention. She got it.
Oh, dear. So it is that time of the show again. It's mini movie review time. And what have you found for us this week, Velvet?
Okay, I found this little gem. It is just under 6 minutes, an Australian short film that was filmed in 2010, and it just, when I watched this was one of those mini movies, little short film that it just caught me in the right mood, and I ended up laughing over this. I probably enjoyed this way more than most people would, because I'm a metalhead at heart, and I love 80s hair metal, and just... Anyway, so it's called Air. It's like, this is evidently, I guess this is a remake of an old short, but anyways, it's now called Something in the Air. And this was actually a short film that was made for Tropfest, so back in 2010. And anyways, it's got a couple of actors. I don't know, did you recognize any of the actors in this one?
No.
Okay, no. Just curious. Okay, so I won't name off the actors because most likely most of us don't know who they are. What cracked me the fuck up is right when this starts, a man walks into a music shop, and he's dressed as Mr. Australia, and he's wearing it. Yeah, see, you're laughing too.
I know.
This movie just had me fucking going from the moment it started. I was already laughing. So this guy walks into this music shop, and he's dressed in like a one-piece jumpsuit. It's sequined. It's red, white, and blue, Australian flag themed. I lost it when I saw he had a white sequin star right on his crotch.
Yes.
And I'm just like, I can't. And then he's wearing fucking the like worst 80s style hair metal wig. And I don't even want to give away what he asked for when he goes into this music shop, but let's just say it's an unusual request, but the guy who does it so well, and he plays it so straight. And then at the very end, there's a very tiny slight twist from the associate who works in the music shop that helps him with his unusual request, because then he asks Mr. Australia question at the very end, and it just this thing had me just laughing my ass off the entire time, and I actually ended up cry laughing because I was just like, "Oh, are you serious? I can't believe this is happening." And so, what did you think of this?
I thought it was very funny. It was just short and sweet and straight to the point. It was very funny. I think we can actually say what he wants to buy. I don't think that's
okay. It just because it was just like, okay, what is this guy? Because he obviously this guy likes rock and roll or heavy metal or hard rock, like something in that genre. He wants to rock out, so he goes into this music shop, and the associate's like, "Hey, what can I help you out with?" He wants to buy an air guitar.
Yes, an air guitar.
An air guitar.
but where it goes and why it's so funny is because it's the manager of the store doesn't have a problem with this at all, and the poor shop assistant is just totally cannot understand what is going on. And then we won't say any more about what happens from that point because that'll give it all away. But it is absolutely hilarious.
It is. It killed me.
Where it goes. And but the other thing too, I did think it was funny is on this jumpsuit that he's got. It's got a cape and everything, doesn't it? It's like right. And right on his crotch, as you're saying, is
the white star.
There is, but it's the Federation star, right? That's like an American wearing the bald eagle on their dick, right? The Federation Star is the symbol of Australia. It's not the kangaroo and shit like that. It's actually this thing called the Federation Star, right? And but it's plastered right on his manhood.
Oh.
It's absolutely hilarious. It's really well done,
it just killed me the entire time. I was like, the moment I watched this and I was crying laughing, I'm like, that's it. It's a little bit short. It's only under 6 minutes. So, I mean, there's not too much we can tell you about it without giving it away because we want you to watch it and enjoy it. But I was just like, okay, this has to be our mini movie for the week.
It was a good one. It's very funny. It really is. I mean, it starts and you think it's going to go in a different direction to where it does. And the direction it takes you is very funny. And the other thing too about it, even though it's actually hilarious, it's played deadpan straight. And that's what makes it work, I think, sort of so well. It really is going. Did you know how it went at Trop Fest or?
Unfortunately, no, I didn't do that much homework on it, but I came across a list of Australian short films, a website that's dedicated to that, and this was one of their top picks. And so I just went off that list, and I was like, I can see why this is one of their top picks for Australian short films. So evidently, there are quite a few people that have enjoyed this as much as we did.
Yes, you won't be disappointed. It's 6 minutes, I think, out of your life, it is very funny. And realistically, with the exception of what's on the jumpsuit, you could put any national flag on the jumpsuit or whatever, right? You can change, and the other thing too is you can change the accent of the actors, and this movie is universal. What they're doing
really
here is 100% universal. This would work as well in Canada, in Britain, in Russia.
Oh my God.
This would even work in bloody Saudi Arabia. It is this, it would work anywhere. And I think that's what's so good about it. It's so universal, I love it.
Very funny. Yeah, it's hilarious. So if you want to check it out, they do have it on YouTube. You can just type in something in the air Australian short film, and you should be able to find it. And we'll also tweet about it throughout the week, so you can check it out. But if you need a laugh, and if you like hair metal, if you like heavy metal, if you like air guitar culture, you'll want to check out this little mini movie from Australia.
Oh, most definitely. I absolutely loved it. All right. Well, we will. That was a very short one, but it's a very short film. So there you go. So all right. Quick break, and we'll be back with movie number 2. Okay, so movie number 2, and we're going back in time a little bit now, back to 1978, which is, of course, the time of Ozploitation. And although this movie, whenever people talk about Ozploitation, this movie is always brought up. Although I'm not really sure it is an Ozploitation movie, and I'll be interested to see what Velvet thinks about that in a moment. And it is called Long Weekend. And did you enjoy this little offering, Velvet?
Because originally when we were doing, choosing our movies for this Australian Day theme, we had another choice, and because we weren't sure we were going to be able to find Long Weekend for me to watch.
Yes.
But I am so glad we went with this one and we found a copy of this one, because this one was so much more than I expected, and I really enjoyed it.
Look, I'm really glad you did, because this is a movie which did very poorly at the box office, but movie critics and movie makers absolutely adored it. It was one of those ones where the people who do the craft liked it, but the general public didn't. But over time, it's slowly built itself up into cult status. So much so that it was in fact remade in 2008. Called Nature's Grave. So once again, when a movie gets remade, you're pretty much in cult status. So, anyway, it was directed by Colin Edelson, and from 1978, as we said, and stars John Hargraves, and I think it's Bryony. Is it Bryony?
Did we say Bryony?
Or Bryony Barretts. I think that's how she pronounces her name, even though she's really quite famous, so I should be able to say that. But anyway, but never mind. And they play a couple called Peter and Marcia, and they're, I suppose we would describe them as an upwardly mobile, upper middle class couple.
Yes.
Basically, university educated. They've got money. They live in a good part of which actually is meant to be Melbourne, but it doesn't actually say that. But it's meant to be Melbourne. They're meant to live in an affluent area. They've got a very nice house. He drives a Triumph sports car. Money is one of her jobs. Is she's like a party hostess. They're socially very well known, and all this sort of stuff. But they've got a bit of a secret, and that is that their marriage is not very happy. They've been playing around with affairs. It's even suggested a little bit that they've sort of dabbled in swinging, but it's not really they don't go into a lot of depth about it. And and she has fallen pregnant, but not to Peter, to another man, and she's only recently just had an abortion. And so she's sort of recovering from that, and their marriage is really on the rocks, it really is on the rocks. And anyway, they decide that a long weekend is coming up, 3-day weekend, so they're going to go away camping, which is probably the worst thing they could probably do, to save their marriage. However, there's something else within this story, and that is that they're not really very nice people. They don't they are anti-heroes. They don't really give a shit about anyone but themselves, and they especially don't give a shit about the environment around them, even though they're going camping. And we start to see this when they finally get to their campsite, and they litter, they throw rubbish everywhere. They have no problem in killing the animals if they see them. They start chopping down a tree. Why? Because it's fun. It's like, and I think it's fair enough to say, because of the age of this movie, the environment starts to fight back.
Which sounds goofy as hell, but it works really effectively in this movie. Like you said, this is basically this is an eco message film delivered via the horror of media, medium of horror. This is, it's got elements of psychological thriller, but yeah, this is definitely take care of your environment or the environment might take care of you.
Absolutely. There was one thing, though, actually, about this movie that the writer actually complained about by the time it actually got on the screen. And that is that he did say that his intention got a little bit misread in the sense that we sort of see the environment fighting back within, pretty much as soon as they arrive. And his intention was never meant to be that. He wanted them to have a certain grace period before it started to happen. But in the movie, it sort of starts to happen straight away. And he was a little bit disappointed with that because he said that makes it a little bit hard for people watching to necessarily understand what's going on. But it was sort of done that way to try to make it more of a horror suspense. And I think it worked in one way, but then it sort of missed the message in another. I was wondering what you thought.
And yeah, because at first I thought it was, honestly, when this movie first started, I thought it was going to be a kind of like The Hills Have Eyes type movie. I thought it was just going to be a lot of fucking weird people are out in the woods. And then you realize, no, this is just a creepy ass place. And it caught me a little off guard because I thought it was going to be one of those just, you're out in the outback, Wolf Creek type serial killers running around, and it wasn't that. This is actually a really interesting piece of storytelling. Even like the last 20 minutes of the movie has almost no dialogue, and it manages to keep you hooked in and watching and wondering what's going to happen, which is a really hard thing to pull off in film nowadays. If people aren't constantly bantering back and forth or having somebody monologuing to keep your attention, we oftentimes lose, interest. But this film maintains your interest even when there's lack of dialogue. So I thought that was really well done. Also, I love animals, and this had like all the cute little creatures of Australia that can kill you in it.
Well, it had a number of them. It had a number of them. Although there were some technical mistakes. I mean, at the very start, when they arrive, we see them being growled at by a Tasmanian devil. Now, of course, they're meant to be in southern Australia. Okay, you have to explain to me, what is a Tasmanian devil? I honestly do not know what that is. When I hear that, I think of Looney Tunes. Yes.
I honestly don't know what that is.
A Tasmanian devil, it's obviously it's a purely Australian animal. It's a marsupial. Okay. You won't find it in any other country. It's, unlike birds and insects, which obviously are, will vary, in regions. This is totally indigenous to Australia, a bit like a kangaroo. They're only found in the island south of Australia, which is called Tasmania, which is a bit like Australia's Hawaii, but it's cold. They're incredibly vicious. They're about the size of a possum. Okay.
And were they actually calling it a possum in the movie?
They don't call it anything. You just see it, and you see it growling and snarling in it, because they've got razor-shaped sharp teeth and stuff.
Okay, I know exactly what you're talking about, because every time they showed that creature, I was like, oh my god, that is so cute, but then it bit the shit out of the guy's hand, and I'm like,
oh, no, that's different. That's a different animal. That's later on. That is a possum. That is a possum. That was the possum. That was the possum, yeah. So,
see, I was like, I didn't know what any of these animals in this movie was. I was like, okay, there's a kangaroo. I know what that is. Oh, there's a snake. I know what that is. And they even, at one point, the guy called the thing on the beach a bunyip. And I was like, hey, it's a good thing I know Warren, because otherwise I wouldn't know what a bunyip is. And now I do.
Well, he was sort of being a bit tongue-in-cheek, because what it is, because what he meant was because dugongs have often been mistaken for the concept that they are bunyips, because they often actually come into tidal rivers, And they do sound like they're one of these weird animals that, I mean, because they're a mammal, they're not a fish. Okay. So, so a bit like a sea lion, something like that, but they're very ugly. They're not an attractive animal at all.
Kind of like a manatee.
Yeah, actually, a manatee is a very close example. Yes, a bit like a manatee. And so they will, cry and howl and make all sorts of noises. And of course, we hear that throughout the movie. And of course, but it's played with the idea that the wife thinks that she's possibly been haunted by the spirits of her unborn child. So what it really is, it's actually just the dugong, which of course they don't treat very well.
No.
They don't treat any animal in this very well. They basically they just treat every animal, every bit of the environment as shit. But there's something else in this movie as well. It's not just the animals that fight back; it's nature itself. There's actually almost an element of Aboriginal spirituality actually in this movie, which is, if you don't treat the environment properly, the environment will hunt you down. It's not, and this is all, part of Aboriginal culture, religion and stuff. I mean, you can't just treat the world like this. It will have its revenge. The environment is not just a placid thing. It's a living organism, and it will fight back. And that's exactly what it does, because you'll even notice in this that the roads that they're on change. Like, did you notice that? Like, you would think a road's just a road, but no, where the roads aren't, a road will be there 1 minute and it's gone the next.
Yeah.
And that's that horror spiritual side that gets thrown into it as well. Where even the plants are fighting back. It's really quite amazing. The plants will even make themselves fall, so they will drop onto somebody. It's a very interesting movie.
This movie did a really good job of building tension. Like, one of the ways it did it was it would just drop the entire music, like soundtrack. There would just be no music, and all you would hear is like twigs cracking. You would hear that horrible, like, howling, screaming, moaning noise. And it would just make you so nervous. And then they would slowly start bringing in some music into the film again. But they did that strategically several times throughout the film, which I thought was really effective. But seriously, that was like the worst place on the fucking planet to go fucking camping. It was so creepy. I mean, the way they were like, okay, we're going to leave right when I get home from work, and then like it's nighttime when they arrive, and it's dark, and it's just there's no lights. It's creepy, and just it was like, that is the worst place on the planet to go fucking camping.
Well, it's actually really interesting that you say that, Velvet, because this is something that a lot of film reviewers have actually brought up, and it's actually the countryside, where they're camping. And it's because it's been brought up that apparently, like in Australia, when this movie first came out, people said it wasn't scary because they sort of said, and here's the reason why. Everybody who grows up or lives in Australia knows what we call the bush, like the forests, okay? They know what it looks like. They all go there for picnics. They all, or they go there on school trips. They do all that sort of stuff. They go camping. They do all this sort of stuff. They know what all the animals are like. They know what they all look like. They know what's dangerous, what's not dangerous, and so forth. But to a foreign viewer, right, this looks very different. And
Exactly.
so
Yes.
when this movie was released, for instance, in the United States, a lot of people in America said, fuck, that looks really scary. But Australian audiences said, no, it's not. and that was one of the reasons why the movie wasn't really successful here.
That totally makes sense. Yeah, no, because to me, like, even as I was telling you, I was like, I didn't even know what some of those animals were, because I was like, well, it looks cute, but then it, like, bites the shit out of the guy, and I'm like, but it's deadly. It's like, yeah, it's totally what you don't know. You know, different culture, different atmosphere, different creatures. I was just like, this is okay. First off, this area is creepy. I don't know what those animals are. What's that fucking noise? Where are they? You know, it's like just yeah. From a foreign perspective, for me as an American watching this Australian horror film, I was just like, ugh, this is so creepy. Ugh.
And the other thing too that's interesting is that the animals and the environment. Well, I shouldn't just say the animals, because it's not just the animals; it's the environment itself. The way it fights back is not actually trying to kill the people. Well, don't be careful how much I say here. It's they're almost playing with people's minds, so they turn on each other. It's really interesting the way it's done, and that's where you've got this psychological thing. Like, for instance, we will find also when they're at this sort of beach camping spot, which is meant to be in the middle of nowhere. You know, it's not meant to be like a well-known place. They're not actually alone, but and we see that what's happening to them is happening to other people as well.
Right.
You know, this is not just the environment picking out two random people. This is the environment actually going after the entire human race. Yeah, so, you know, and actually fighting back, which I thought was, you know, was very interesting as well. Because even at the start, when he pulls into the petrol station / pub, you know, to buy some beers and to, you know, fill up the petrol or gas, as you guys say. He's, like he sort of says, I'm going to this beach. And they say, where's that? He says, it's only a couple of miles down the road. We've never heard of it. And it's almost like this place doesn't really, like, you start to wonder as the movie goes on, are they actually really still on Earth, or are they even, have they been somehow, once they've entered this place, they're in some weird different dimension.
Like, I didn't go that far with it, but I definitely, like, for me, it leaned more towards psychological thriller, because, like I said, you do start going, okay, is this really happening, or is it in their mind? Like you said. So, I mean, but that can play into the whole, like, or are they in a different dimension? I mean, that can really be interpreted in a lot of ways. I do like the way this movie actually pulled off the whole nature fighting back, and it's not goofy or silly or unbelievable at all. Because, for example, M. Night Shyamalan tried to do that with The Happening, and that movie's fucking terrible when nature fought back in that movie.
Yes.
So it's amazing how this movie pulls it off really honestly, elegantly, and very, not subtly, but it's smooth. It's very smoothly done. It's not like forced. It's not like, oh, come on. It's like very believable and realistic. Whereas something like The Happening by M. Night Shyamalan is, oh, the plants are fighting back. It just ended up being goofy and stupid. But not this movie. Long Weekend totally pulls it off, or pulled it off.
And the other thing, remember too, that this is they did this in 1978.
Yes.
You know, so, and they pulled it off better, you know. I agree with you. I think they pulled it off better. Because the other thing too is that if they wanted to just go down real horror, they could have just had them been attacked by thousands of snakes, or you know, or attacked by, you know, sort of 100 Tasmanian devils or something. But they didn't do that. You know, they didn't do that. It was almost like the animals would hiss and growl at them, but they would just let everything take its course. It's going to happen. We're just, you know, we're just here, we're watching, you know, and so I thought that was, you know, that was very good. But sorry, to get back to the original point I was saying about the Tasmanian devil that's in this, is that this movie is set on the mainland, and Tasmanian devils are indigenous to Tasmania, the island that we mentioned, right? So there wouldn't actually have been a Tasmanian devil where they were. They're not there. You know, they're actually in what we call Tassie, which is also slang for a woman's. Anyway, we won't go down that path. So you can sort of get the idea. It's an island south of Australia, and it's shaped as a triangle. That'll just give you an idea what I'm talking about. Anyway, So it's Australian slang. If anyone ever talks about your map of Tassie, that's what they're talking about. That's what they're talking about. There you go. There's a bit of Australiana you just learnt. The map of Tassie. So I'm really glad you enjoyed it, though, Velvet. I really did, because I was a bit worried, because we originally were going to talk about a different horror movie, as you said, which is called The Tunnel, and it's a much more recent movie, which is about.
And that one's interesting, but I feel I got so much more out of this one than I did the other one, because I've seen that one before, and this one I hadn't, and I was just like, I don't know, I was like, I really want to see this one, because the moment you said it bombed in Australia, but everybody else liked it, for some reason I wanted to see this one.
I think one of the problems too is it was made at a time where you have to remember, we've got movies like Jaws, and all this sort of stuff, where people were expecting big, bitey creatures, and this didn't really deliver on that. It's as you said, it's psychological rather than being big creatures eating people. And I think that's the reason why the audiences had a bit of a problem with it. But whereas, other movie directors and actors sort of said, wow, this is amazing. This is really good. And what did you think of the two main actors? Because there are really only two actors in this, apart from a couple of extras with only one or two lines. It's all held together by these two actors.
Yeah, so at first I was like, God, that woman's a fucking bitch. Like, I do not like her at all. And I was like, see, this guy's really trying. But then as the story unfolds, I start to see why she's a bitch, but I still don't like her. But now I can empathize a little bit. I'm like, oh, okay, I see what she's going through now. And okay, I see what she's going through. But then this guy's, equally an asshole, because he keeps like fucking destroying nature and killing animals. Like, he keeps randomly firing off his shotgun. And at one point, like, this one made me so mad when he was like, got drunk and like, he just starts firing off his gun like an asshole. And like, they show little ducklings, and their mother, the mother duck is dead because he shot the mother duck because he was goofing off, and all the little ducklings don't have their mother now. And I'm like, oh, so I mean, like, a lot of animals get killed in this.
Well, not really.
We should just ran over.
We should just life, we should just point this out. Sorry, no animals were killed in the making of this. They may have killed a spider or something like that, but they didn't kill like mammals and things like that. Right. The dugong in this is actually just made. It's not a real one. Yeah. So just to point that out. Yeah.
So I mean, but I mean, for the sake of the story, figuratively and not in real life, animals get killed in this movie, and you're like, oh. And I actually looked up a little bit of trivia. It turns out that the kangaroo that gets ran over actually was a real kangaroo, but it was already dead. So when they show it getting ran over, it was, I was like, oh, yuck. I kind of wish I didn't know that now. I liked it better when I thought it was a rubber kangaroo covered in fur or something.
It was it's just what they, and look, I think our American listeners will understand us. It's what you guys call roadkill. It's unfortunately, we have so many cars on the road, animals and cars collide, and
exactly. Another interesting piece of trivia I found out was the main actress, let's look up her name again, Brioni Behetz. It turns out that, first off, she was actually married to the director, Colin Eggleston, when they made this movie, and she actually was not the first choice to play that character in the movie. Actually, he had cast another actress, and the casting fell through, and so then he went ahead and cast his wife in this movie.
Although it should be said, though, that she was actually a very well-known actress.
She is very good in this. This was not him playing favorites, definitely not.
Oh, no.
She was really good in this.
But she was more well-known, though, for Australian television, not for cinema.
And you get to see her boobies.
Well,
I had to say it.
Okay, you do get to see her boobies. Mind you, there wasn't really any TV show she ever did where you didn't get to see her boobies. She was very well known for I'll put it to you this way. In Australia, in the 70s and 80s, everybody got nude on TV. Okay, so it was pretty much a stock standard thing. I mean, she was one of the original stars of a show called Number 96. If you want to go and look that up, she also, when she left that show, she went on to be in a show called The Box. Now, both these shows were very famous because they were free to wear shows. So free to wear, it's not cable. Free to wear in the 1970s, where everybody got naked on the TV show. Australian TV, just a little bit different maybe to American TV.
Totally.
So to see her boobies wasn't really a big thing for Australian audiences. They'd already seen them 100 times before. But yes, you do get to see boobies. And the other thing too is that John Hargreaves, the male star who plays Peter, he was a very well-known actor. He'd been in a ton of movies, and he would be in a ton of movies after this as well. And he was sort of like one of Australia's, I won't say pin-up boys, but he was he was
a good-looking guy.
Oh, he was very, very, very popular.
Okay, I felt so bad for him in this movie towards the end when he is just running around in the woods in those tiny little white shorts that are barely covering anything, and I was just like, oh, that's just miserable.
I know, when he's trying to escape. I know. Yes, it's he was. The loss of John Hargreaves was a horrible thing. I mean, he was a wonderful actor. He was, he was one of the founding actors of when the Australian industry really got big, and his loss was horrible. And, hey, we still don't have a cure. So maybe don't stop that scientific funding, guys. All right.
Right.
Because John Hargreaves died in the mid-90s of AIDS. And so it was a real loss because, he was an amazing actor, an absolutely amazing actor. You see his other work because he's in so many Australian films, and it was a big shock actually, when it happened. So
it always is when, especially nowadays, like back in the 90s, unfortunately, it wasn't uncommon for people to succumb to that disease. Nowadays, there's been a lot of, because of research and funding, there's been a lot of progress made, and you can live with that disease for a long time or a lifetime even. So evidently, he didn't quite hit that era of breakthrough, unfortunately. So that is a shame.
Yes, it was a bit before, yes. I mean, even back in the 80s and obviously the mid 80s, we only just learned, the disease basically started, if you like. And, it was, so for people who did contract it, no one contracts AIDS, but contract HIV, which will obviously may or may not develop into AIDS. Right. Obviously for him, it was in the early days. It did obviously, become AIDS, and it would take his life in the end. So it was quite sad, actually. Because I grew up. He used to be in a TV show called Young Ramsey, where he played a country vet. It was like a kids' family sort of show, and it was like the local country vet looking after animals and things like that. And I grew up with him watching that show. I used to love that show, so it was, But anyway, sad day, but never mind. But yes. So it's, and as we said, this movie was remade in 2008. I don't think quite as well, but,
okay, I was curious to check it out, but I'll take your word for it.
It's,
some movies don't need to be remade, so.
No, I know we've talked about this before, haven't we? It's like there are some films that I know it brings a movie or an idea to a brand new audience, but, maybe what we should be doing is trying to bring that audience to the movie rather than remaking it to bring the story to a new audience, Right. This idea that a lot of people have that, they won't watch a movie if it's over 10 years old, I think is a real shame because there's so much stuff out there which is amazing.
Yeah, and this year is the year of the remake and the reboots because there are a ton of franchises that are being revived this year, especially in the horror genre. They're coming out with another Friday the 13th that's supposed to be finally an origin story of Jason Voorhees and why he can never die. They're doing another Saw with they officially retired that franchise, but now they're bringing it back. I mean, there's going to be another Amityville, which I'm just like, oh, not another one of those.
No,
please stop.
no, not another Amityville.
Horror.
No,
yeah, they're doing another one.
Especially,
and I'm not gonna lie, it actually looks kind of good because I've seen the trailers for it.
I wouldn't. I wouldn't doubt it. I mean, like Friday the 13th, it's a bit different because that's a franchise. It's a bit like making another Star Trek movie. It's a franchise, so that's different.
Right.
I don't mind that. But Amityville, I mean, seriously, and the other thing that really annoys me too about the whole thing is that it's still sold as if it's a true story, and that really pisses me off because Amityville.
Sorry,
because Amityville was made up. The whole fucking thing was made up. And
well, that's just like, but they did so many movies, like fucking Texas Chainsaw Massacre. They're like, oh, that one's based on a true story. Oh, it is not. It's based on a fucking horror movie. Is what it's based on. That's what it is.
Oh, I know. It's like Amityville. The family did it to make fucking money. They did a deal with a writer. They had a book written, and all the rest of it. And unfortunately, of course, it backfired on them because it cost them their marriage. The money never came through, and the whole thing backfired. But that wasn't their intention, And this idea that these people still say that the story is real. I mean, give me a break. Seriously, that house apparently has been sold 5 or 6 times since that couple lived in it, and not one single fucking paranormal thing has ever happened in the house.
Right.
Just kind of a giveaway that it's not real, I mean, anyway.
But yeah, that's what we have to look forward to this year. I mean, they're reviving some weird franchises this year too, like Maniac Cop, which I believe there were 3 films in the 80s, and it's a cop who's a serial killer. And so I mean, I'm actually kind of like, well, that actually might be kind of a cool concept now.
Yeah,
people love serial killers now. But and the one from the 80s is honestly kind of goofy, kind of cheesy, kind of formulaic and predictable. So hopefully they can fix that. But yeah, it's going to be the year of remakes and reboots, and so it's good that we'll probably be reviewing a lot of those movies before
I know.
Like the originals of those movies before the remakes come out.
Well, it's one thing I know that we did talk during the week, Velvet, about should we do the original Mad Max, because I was actually quite surprised talking to people who are not Australian by birth. How many people think they've seen the original Mad Max but haven't?
Right.
Because there were 3 Mad Max movies made in Australia, and then, of course, there was the current one, the 4th one, which is an Australian director, but it's an American film shot in Africa. So it's not,
right.
It's not really Australian anymore. But the original 3 were, of course, all filmed in Australia. They were all Australian films. But the problem is people have seen number 2 and number 3, especially number 3 with Tina Turner, and they think that's the original Mad Max. I was absolutely stunned how many people think that's the original movie. They don't realise that the original movie had nothing to do with a post-apocalyptic world. It's just a story set in the future about 2 police officers and their adventures with gangs who have taken over the roads. It's nothing to do with a post-apocalyptic horrible, but people don't know that. I was stunned, absolutely stunned to find that.
And that's already been remade. I mean, they've already rebooted that franchise and already made a sequel of the rebooted franchise. I mean, it's amazing how much Hollywood right now is recycling the fuck out of movies. Like, they're remaking movies that are 10 years old, and I'm just like, God damn, let it gather some dust, let the movie at least gather some dust before you remake it, Like,
I mean, so at least people, I mean, if you're going to sell it to a new audience, at least work on the premise the audience hasn't seen the original film. It's, I mean, I don't sometimes mind when they remake movies as an homage to the original movie. I mean, for instance, I've always been a big fan of the stories of the Saint, Simon Templar. And so when they did the Saint movie, I was really, really happy to see that. But that's not really a remake because there's been about 5 Saint movies and 3 TV series. So it's not really a remake, you know what I mean?
Right.
But so it's a bit like we were saying, you know, like Star Trek, it's a franchise. So, and even though, let's say something like The Saint, it's not a franchise, but it's just another movie in all the other movies that they make about that topic. But this idea of just remake after remake, isn't there anyone in Hollywood with an original idea?
You know, the sad part is there are people in Hollywood with original ideas, but unfortunately they have to go to these people and pitch their original ideas, and they always go, oh, you know what? That would be great. But you know what we should do? We should, remove that awesome character and replace it with this generic character that everybody's seen a million times, because whenever we have that character in a movie, we always get great box office sales. Like they don't want original. They want to follow this formula that they think is going to make them the most money. And unfortunately, the screenwriters and the directors always have to submit to that whim unless they go independent. But you know how hard it is with the independent film track, because a lot of times, okay, so you made your movie, nobody knows it exists. Nobody can watch it, so it's tough. It's so hard to make a movie.
The other thing too that I don't like, Velvet, I'm interested to see what you think about this, is when they remake a movie, which is, let's say that you've got an original movie and let's say it's based on a story, like a book or something like that. But when they remake it, they totally change the ideal of what the story was about, and they turn it into something different. I mean, I remember I went and saw The Four Feathers about 15 years ago when it was remade and it came out. And I remember that movie as a kid and I really loved it. I thought the story was amazing. The idea of a man who resigned his commission from the army 24 hours before a war broke out because he didn't know the war had broken out and he was labelled a coward, so he had to go and prove that he wasn't a coward. And then when they remade the movie, what did they do? They turned him into a war protester. Now, that's not what the story was about. The story was meant to be about human courage. It wasn't meant to be, which is what the movie turned into, a fucking director's personal opinion on whether the war in Iraq was justified or not. Now, so, I mean, if you want to make a movie about whether war is right or wrong, fantastic. But don't destroy an amazing story in order to pitch your personal politics.
Right, totally.
Do you know what I mean?
Well said. Yeah, well said.
I mean,
well
even though I agreed with this guy's politics, but that's not the point. I still hated what he did.
Right.
It was just so wrong. Even though he would go on to make movies such as, Elizabeth, with Cate Blanchett and stuff. So he's a great director, don't get me wrong, but I just thought what he did was just so wrong. But anyway. We've really got off the point from Long Weekend, haven't we?
I mean, we know we're on track. We're talking about, should you remake a film that's already been made? Should you just leave it alone? Or should you remake a film to introduce it to other audiences? I don't know. It'll always be open for debate. Yeah, it'll always be open for debate.
I mean, I would say movies from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, even into the 70s, I think it's okay. But like
sometimes
you said,
you need to, because especially if people would actually go back to some of the fucking movies from the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, some of those need to be remade just because they've not been preserved well. The sound quality's horrible. I mean, the acting style hasn't aged well. Like I always laugh about film noir, and I always say, this is a film noir, you see?
Yeah, I know.
Just the style of acting changes over the decades. And I mean, films like that, I don't mind if they remake it and they stay true to the source material. And I don't even mind when they do modernized interpretations where, okay, this movie took place in the 50s. Now it's going to take place today with modern technology. But as long as you keep the source material and the main story and the main themes, I'm okay with that. But a lot of times they don't do that and they butcher it and they change the ending and they take out the best characters. I mean, it gets a little too cut up. It gets like plastic surgery. Of the worst kind.
Yeah, I know. It's a bit like, I mean, I remember, I think, was it there was a TV show, an American TV show with a British actor, Edward Woodward, which was called The Enforcer. I think it was called The Enforcer, and that was only just recently remade with Denzel Washington, I think. And it failed to capture what the TV show was really about. It just didn't really sort of work. And there's so many, I mean, God forbid. I mean, I remember when they, and the other thing too that I think is a real problem is when Country A remakes an old movie of Country B, and they don't get what the movie was really about. You know, it's a classic example would be something like The Italian Job. Now, a classic cult movie from Britain, remade in America, and totally lost the point about what the movie was meant to be about.
Yes.
You know, they turned it into a revenge movie when it's not a revenge movie. The original one was a heist movie. You know, it was don't get me started. You know, don't get me started.
It was a movie that did not need to be remade, and when they did, it was because I saw that shit in the theater and it was terrible. I was just like, I was actually bored. That was one of those movies I saw in the theater, and I'm like, there's tons of action. They're driving these little Mini Coopers all over the fucking place, but I'm still bored to tears. Why is this so boring?
Yes, and you watch the original Italian Job. I mean, so iconic was that film, so cult was that film, that they used the countdown from that movie to open the London Olympics. Right? I mean, that's how much that movie had written itself into cult, culture. And then America, Hollywood decides, oh yeah, we'll just remake it as long as there's not some Mini Coopers in it. That's close enough. I mean, the car chase in the original Italian Job, right, with the Mini Coopers.
Sorry.
That wasn't really what the movie was about. That was an amazing bit that was put on, but that wasn't really what the movie was about, you know?
No.
And if you're going to take that little bit of it and then make it what the movie is about, oh, no. It's... You know?
I'm sorry. No, exactly.
You know? And the other thing too, the original Italian Job, when they're jumping minis from building rooftops to building rooftops and all the rest of it, they're doing it for real. No CGI, no mucking around, they just hired some racing drivers and said, right, can you jump this car from this roof to that roof? Yeah, all right.
Yeah. Nice. Cool.
In fact, here's a little story about the Italian Job. When they were shooting the car chase around Milan in Italy, they were technically in breach of Italian law. They weren't allowed to do that sort of stuff, right? And so the director was off when they did many of the major stunts. The director was actually sitting in the airport ready to hop on an airplane because he couldn't actually be on site, because if something went wrong, by Italian law, he would have immediately been arrested.
Oh my God!
So he wasn't actually there. And the other thing too is at the ending of that film, when they drive the minis into the bus, and the stunt was done for real. The bus was driving, and the Mini Coopers actually drive up the ramp into the bus, going at 80 kilometers an hour. They did it for real. And the interesting thing is the guy who's hanging off the side of the bus, waving the cars in, that's the director. Because you ready for this? They could not get a British or Italian stuntman to do it. They said it's too dangerous. So the director did it himself.
What a madman. But, that makes for a great cinema.
Oh,
people that risk their lives to make movies.
So, yeah. So
risk their lives and their freedom.
I know. But then you look at the product they came out with and, you say, wow, that movie is still iconic today, So just stop remaking this shit. Stop remaking it. It's just... Yeah,
I agree. I agree. It's a shame. I mean, there is always the independent circuit. It just, it just depends. Everybody's story is different, Sometimes you write a story and it gets accepted and then they make so many changes and it's out of your hands. Or like I said, you can go the independent route, but their chances are nobody will see it sometimes. That's frustrating that you spend all this time and money and effort to make this film that nobody knows about and barely anybody's seen. So it's tough.
I mean, one thing I do like that they do is if they do make this is a classic example. Now, The Thing, okay, which is a movie we probably should talk about actually at some stage on this show.
Oh, absolutely.
But the original thing is obviously from the 1950s. Now, it was then remade, obviously, by John Carpenter in the 1980s. And it took what was really a pretty shitty B-grade, horror sort of monster thing, and turned it into what's often called one of the most amazing, probably one of the best sci-fi creature features that's ever been made. And I would stand by that. I reckon it's definitely one of the best ever made. And one of the reasons why I think it's so good is it was the first movie in that genre to use real science. And I think that's what makes it so, they explain the science in it. And that's what is so good about it. Now, when they remade that movie, The Thing, recently, they didn't remake the movie. They just gave it the same name, but it's actually a prequel.
Yes.
So I thought that was clever. So they sort of said, well, we could just remake it. No, why don't we make the prequel? So John Carpenter made what happened on the American base. So why don't we make this movie about what happened on the Norwegian base?
Yeah, which I saw, and it was actually quite well done. I enjoyed that. But from the 80s, I love that movie. And the first time you see it, that scares the shit out of you. It is just, wow. Just what they did with special effects, and they just went crazy in that one. It was it's fucking amazing. It's fucking amazing.
I mean, I still stand by that. One of the best science fiction creature features. I rate it higher than Alien, actually. I really think it's brilliant.
I agree.
I really think it's brilliant. I agree. And I love the way, too, when they did do the remake or the prequel, the very last scene in the prequel is the opening scene of John Carpenter's movie. Yes, which I thought was very well done.
Exactly. No, it's such a cool movie.
Yeah, most definitely.
If you haven't seen it, and we're not reviewing The Thing this episode, but if you haven't seen The Thing from the 80s, go check that one out too.
Yes, well, I must admit, we were actually talking about Long Weekend, and I think we've spoken about... How many movies have we spoken about so far? The Thing, The Italian Job... Oh, anyway, I suppose we should rate Long Weekend.
Definitely. Okay,
Velvet.
I'll make mine quick. Yeah, this is definitely worth checking out. Like I said, it's an eco message delivered via horror film. It's got psychological thriller elements in it. Definitely worth checking out. So I'm going to give this, out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, I'm going to give it 4 Erics.
Oh, that's pretty good. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
Actually, I'm going to go the same, to be truthful. I'm going to give it 4. I was going to go a little bit lower, but I think talking to you, I've actually upped it a little bit. Because, it was, sometimes I'm a little bit scared about the fact that, did I just think this was good, or did other people also see what I was talking about?
Right, yeah.
And I think it's great that we sort of see, we see eye to eye on this. So I'm going to give it 4 Erics as well. I think definitely hunt this one down, and it's not that hard to find, guys. Just spend a few minutes. You will be able to find it. It's great. And also just be a little bit careful. There is another movie from 2008, which I think is a Mexican film called The Long Weekend. So don't get, and it's nothing to do with this movie, all right? So don't get confused.
So the one you want is Long Weekend from 1978, and just make sure you can also check to see where it was made and make sure it's an Australian production. So that's like one of the ways that I had to check to make sure I was looking at the right film. Like, okay, is this 1978? Is this an Australian production? Okay, I got the right film.
Yeah. And remember too, if you are looking for it, sometimes it is listed as 1979, not as 1978, because the movie was shot in 1978, but it was actually released in 1979. So it does actually get listed under both dates. So
there you go.
Cool.
Right on.
Cool. All right. All right. Well, I think quick break. We'll try to stay on topic this movie.
No promises.
I know. So quick break, and we'll be right back with our third film. Well, movie number 3. And now, this, I'm going to use the word interesting here. It's and also if people can hear birds in the background, Velvet was just saying it's because Velvet and I obviously are into well, this is podcasting, so not only are you listening possibly at a different time or time zone, Velvet and I are currently in 2 totally different time zones.
Yeah.
So the thing is that for me, it's the middle of the day. And the thing is that even though I do live in a city, I don't know what it's like in your city, but in Australia, concrete don't stop wildlife. So birds are just everywhere. So anyway, now the movie that we are talking about, number 3, I was just apologising for the birds anyway. So yeah, if you can hear them. Anyway, number 3 is from 1988 and it is called Young Einstein. And I think a lot of 80s people are going to remember this or even remember going to see it at the cinema. It is, of course, was written and directed by and stars Yahoo Serious. Now, I'm not too sure, Velvet. Do you think everyone knows who Yahoo Serious is these days? Or
you know what? If you know this film, you know who it is. But he's one of those. For me, he's one of those celebrities that kind of dropped off the planet. Like I only knew of 2 movies that he made. And when I went and checked his credits, he actually directed a 3rd film in the 2000s.
Yes.
So yeah, he's kind of fallen off the radar in the U.S. But I mean, is he a big celebrity still in Australia? Or
he actually never was a big celebrity in Australia. This first film, Young Einstein, although it did make money, actually, it was a success. Mm-hmm. But every other project he put his hand to afterwards was a total flop and financial disaster. He never really got to get to that level of fame. I mean, if you say the word Yahoo Serious, people know who you're talking about, but no one sort of says, oh yes, I loved him, or he was, he never got to that level.
Right.
Even in Australia. In fact, in some ways, I sort of view Yahoo Serious a little bit like, the crocodile guy, Steve Irwin.
Okay.
I mean, Steve Irwin was more popular in America than he was in Australia.
Okay.
So, and I think Yahoo Serious was a bit like that. I think he was actually more popular in the States than he was in Australia. So, and it may have a little bit to do with the topics of his movies and a few other things. But anyway, we can get to that in just a bit. So yes, Young Einstein. So look, our basic story is set in 1906, I think it's meant to be.
Yes,
and it starts in Tasmania, which we spoke about before. No need to mention it, obviously, in Tasmania. And he is the son of a apple farming family. But he doesn't want to be an apple farmer. He has dreams of something greater. And he is, of course, called Albert Einstein. And he does come up with the theory of relativity and various other inventions and theories along the way. And he discovers how to split the beer atom. Yes, I'm not joking. The beer atom. Because until 1906, all beer was flat. And the only way to actually aerate beer was to actually create a nuclear fusion. It's probably news to all the brewers around the world. But anyway, so he discovers how to do that. So he heads off to the mainland to end up in Sydney in the end, although the route he travels to get to Sydney blows my mind. I mean, he seems to go everywhere in Australia before he actually ends up in Sydney. Anyway, to patent this idea. And on the way, he will meet some other scientists, some nice, some bad, who will try to help him. One will try to steal his idea. And it really just follows his adventures in Sydney and then later Paris, although it was still all filmed in Sydney. They just called it Paris. as he tries to make people aware that you splitting the beer atom, if done incorrectly, can create a beer-based atomic bomb. Yes, I'm not joking. A beer-based atomic bomb. So, what did you think of young Einstein?
I love this movie. Oh man. Okay, so this movie came out in 1988. So I saw it when I was like 8 or 9 years old, and this is one of those movies I loved as a kid. I watched it who knows how many times. But this was the first time I've watched it probably since I was 8 or 9 years old, and I'm watching this movie and I still really like it, but I'm here going, how in the hell did I even follow any of what was going on in this movie? It is so adult. It is just not for children. The whole beer atom theme, like the whole, because, 8, 9-year-old children, at least in the United States, on the average, should not be drinking beer. The beer culture in this film's hilarious. But I remember one of my earliest memories about this movie is in the beginning of the movie, there's a Tasmanian devil, but it's not the actual, actual creature.
It's just a puppet.
It's a puppet, kind of like, it's supposed to be kind of like the Looney Tunes Tasmanian devil. And I remember when I was a kid, because remember, I was 8 or 9 years old, I saw this and I thought that was real. And I remember telling my friends, yes, I remember telling my friends at school going, oh, the Tasmanian devil, that cartoon. They're like, yeah. And I'm like, that's real. There's this movie and they show it. I remember thinking that was a real creature when I was a kid and telling people they have Tasmanian devils in this country.
Oh my goodness. Oh God.
I mean, but now I watched it and I was laughing because I was like, okay, that's obviously not real. But when you're a kid, you don't quite have all your bearings in reality. Yeah, you think a lot of stuff exists that doesn't exist as you anyways, but no, this movie is like a laugh a minute. Like, every scene either has something weird or something funny in it. So it's like I'm constantly like chuckling the entire time. And there's animals everywhere, which I absolutely love. I mean, and this movie does a really fun job of taking serious science but being totally inaccurate with it and just coming up with the most ludicrous stuff. Like, he uses the theory of like relativity to, explain how you can add bubbles to beer so you're not drinking flat beer. He uses, science to invent rock and roll. I mean, and there's a lot of music. There's a lot of music in this movie. I did not read. That's probably why I liked it so much when I was a kid. There's so much music in this movie that it's not quite a musical, but it has really long, they're almost like music videos where it's just like, it'll be part of the story, but instead it'll just be a montage of him doing a bunch of stuff too, with a song layered over it. And the soundtrack to this movie is actually quite good. It's like, if you like rock music, pop music, it's actually a really nice soundtrack. I really love the way he put in a lot of Australian stereotypes in a non-derogatory way. I mean, like, he's got beer, he's got kangaroos, he's got surfing, he's got even got Aboriginals in here. Like, it's I know. When you think of Australia as a foreigner, and he put all those fun little stereotypes in there, kind of like maybe to broaden the appeal of the film. This movie's funny also because, obviously it's supposed to be about, Albert Einstein and Marie Curie, and like there's even Charles Darwin, like a lot of these, key scientific personas over the years that have really come up with all these life-changing theories and proven them over time. And like they're supposed to be these people, but they're in the most absurd situations. Like Albert Einstein's was German, he was not Australian.
Yes.
And it's just all kinds of weird stuff in here, but it's pseudoscience, but it's funny because they throw in enough keywords. Like, everybody keeps calling E equals MC squared, they keep calling it EMC.
Yes, I know.
But another thing I always thought was funny about this movie is how everyone in this movie that has no scientific background, they have educated questions about science that young Einstein will then go on to answer for them in a way that sometimes they can understand, sometimes they can't. Well,
I think that's the whole joke of it. I mean, he's staying in a real poverty style hotel, in Sydney in 1906. But all the women who were meant to be prostitutes, who are all staying there as well, who use the room for their business and all this sort of stuff. But suddenly they're talking about the theory of relativity and they're talking about time travel and all this sort of stuff. But that's sort of the joke of it. It's meant to be that everyday people can grasp this stuff. There's no reason why they can't. It's not, in a way, it's almost got a very interesting statement. It's not the people that hold back science. It's actually the people who are trying to use it to create money who are often holding back research. The population can understand this stuff if it's explained to them properly. And that's what I like about this, because that's what he does. And the people around him who are meant to be poverty-infested, very, very poor people, but they understand this stuff, and I like that about it, actually. That was quite good.
Yeah. Well, another thing I thought, now that I'm watching this as an adult, I'm obviously catching a lot more stuff that I didn't catch as a kid. One of the things I noticed in the very beginning of the movie, he's talking about having this simple life and he likes being on the apple farm and he doesn't really seem to want much out of life. Then one day he's sitting and somehow a basket full of apples hits him on the head. Then all of a sudden he starts having all these scientific ideas.
Yes.
Oh, that's where that came from.
Yes.
But it was fun. But I did like the whole theme of the movie, the whole genius among simplicity, scientific mind on a farm. He needs to obviously leave the farm so he can nurture that mind and grow and, do his experiments and, test out his theories. Really like the characters in this movie. One of my favorite parts is when they're trying to suppress his knowledge because they want to steal his ideas from make money off of him, that kind of thing. So they get him thrown into a mental health institution. Nowadays, you can't really say insane asylum. That's considered a little bit derogatory nowadays. But it cracks me up because in the movie, it's insane asylum. And then there's a section that's specifically for mad scientists.
I know. He gets thrown into the mad scientist wing of the asylum. I know. It is amazing. I know.
So, a lot of that stuff. Okay, this I can't figure out. I don't get this. I think it's funny, but I don't know if it's, maybe it's cultural. What is up with the kitten pie? I don't get that.
Okay.
Is that cultural? Or, it's funny to me, but I really don't get it.
It's meant. Okay.
So let me explain it really quick.
Yeah,
and I'll let you explain why I don't explain it.
There is a food in Australia which is called a dim sim. Okay. And it's like, a dim sim, like dim sum. It's a Chinese food, but the Australian version is very different to the original Chinese thing that it was taken from. So, for instance, a little dim sim, you go into, a restaurant in the United States and you order that, they're not very big. They're very small. They're about the size of a meatball or something, or not a meatball, like a matzo ball. Oh, no, about half the size, right?
Okay.
But a dim sim, an Australian version, is 4 times the size. In fact, the current ones, which are called the South Melbourne dim sim, they're huge. They're a meal in themselves, right? But it was always joked that they were made with cats because they were Asian.
No.
Okay. So because there was always the joke that anything that had meat in it that was Asian in Australia was using cat meat. All right, so that's sort of where the joke all sort of comes from,
Okay, because for our listeners, there's a scene in the movie where, they show this cook that works in the mental health institution. He's making the grossest shit on the planet for them to eat. And in one scene, he has a giant pie tin and he puts a bunch of kittens, live, cute, little, fuzzy, adorable, meowing kittens in it. And then he takes a big slab of, pie crust dough and slaps it on top of them. He cuts a couple of holes in it so they can breathe, and he puts it in the oven.
Yeah, I know.
It on in the oven, and young Einstein's escaping, and he loves pies because his mom always makes apple pies for him back home in Tasmania. So he's like, "Oh, I gotta steal this pie." So he grabs the pie out of the oven and he takes off running with it, and the pie crust is already cooked, and so he opens up the pie crust and there's kittens inside it, and they're alive and well, and he takes out these little kittens out of the pie, and I'm always like, what the hell is this? That is so weird. Okay, now I know.
Yeah, well, there's a number of little in jokes in this movie which people, even Australians today, like for instance, if a 16-year-old Australian was to watch this today, even they wouldn't get. You had to be alive in the 80s to get some of the jokes.
Okay.
For instance, there's at the start of the movie, do you notice he takes them up to the top of this big valley and he says, "I want you to dam it."
Yeah.
Now, that's a joke about what was called the supposed Franklin Dam in Tasmania. And it became such an election issue, the government changed. That's how big it was. Because the government at the time was going to dam a river called the Franklin River. And it was going to turn hundreds of kilometres of virgin rainforest into a dam. And the environmentalists said, no, you can't do that. And in the end, it became such a huge election issue, it actually helped change the government. And we went from a man called Malcolm Fraser to the People's Prince called Bob Hawke, who became the Prime Minister. And one of the things he campaigned on was elect me and I'll stop the dam.
Oh, wow.
And so that's the little joke, basically, about the dam. And then we got, well, hey, g'day, mate. We got Bob Hawke. Yeah, I'm the people's prince. Yeah, everyone loves me. I'm Bob Hawke. That's honestly what he sounded like. Yeah, yeah. He was an amazing guy. He was, it's like, women love me and all men want to be me. He was a kind of a bit of a Donald Trump of his time without all the racism and all the rest of it, you know, like he was probably one of the most popular prime ministers we've ever had, you know, because he saw himself as one of the people, you know. So anyway, so that was what that was all about. But the other thing in that too is that you notice when Curie, when she's talking to her parents and she says, "Oh, who's that?" When Yahoo comes to, young Einstein comes knocking on her door, and she says, "Oh, it's just a boy." And they go, "Oh, a boy? Like a man? You know, a man, right?" and then you notice that they say, "Oh, that's really good because, you know, you should be more interested in boys than test tubes." Now, a lot of people will watch that and they'll say, "Oh, it's about you shouldn't be worried so much about your science. You should be getting married." But no, it's not. It's about the whole thing that back in the 1980s, the Australian government started funding what was referred to as test tube babies. In other words, artificial. It's not artificial insemination. You know, what do they call it? You know, now
just test tube babies. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the thing was, it was all done on the public purse, so you didn't have to pay for it, right?
Wow. Well,
you remember, it was Australia, free healthcare, right? Remember? So, so the thing is that, and so it was a bit of a touchy subject at the time because there were people who sort of said, "Well, hang on, free healthcare should be for people who need it. It shouldn't be for people who want to have children but can't." So it was a bit of, so there's all these little in-jokes in there which a lot of people won't get now, you know. So anyway, that's just some interesting stuff about.
Well, like
the film,
I said, I'm amazed that I love this movie as much as I did as a kid, because I was watching this as an adult. Like, wow. Did I even understand any of this movie when I was 8 years old?
You probably just thought it was funny with him falling out of windows and, you know, and all the rest of it.
Crazy hair. Yeah, his crazy hair, the music. I mean, like, it is a really funny movie, actually. Just like the characters in this, and like you said, all the little in jokes that maybe I don't get because I'm American, but even on some level, I'm able to appreciate them. There's a lot of crazy visuals in this. Like I said, the kittens in the pie, like that was one of the first things I remembered. The fucking Tasmanian devil that I thought was real when I was a kid. I mean, there's a lot of, and just Yahoo Serious himself is so fucking weird looking. Hair, he's actually a good looking guy, but just his hair.
That hair, I know. Attention. Yeah.
And obviously that's supposed to be, well, for this movie, originally you think that's because, you know, Einstein had crazy hair.
Well, no, it was just the way Yahoo Serious marketed himself.
It's just the way this guy is. But no, it's a really fun movie. It's hard to explain it without seeing it. You really do have to see it to appreciate it. If you like, you know, quirky comedies from the 80s with Australian accents. You like a little bit of science, you like music. I mean, really, this is a really fun movie, and I'm glad we got to watch this again. And I can see how fake the Tasmanian devil looks now.
It was, well, the other thing too is that you need to remember, as I said, this was made in obviously 1988, and it was the time of, like, we've spoken about Ozploitation before, okay? Now, the mid-80s through to the early 90s is what's often referred to as the Patriot time. It was the push everything Australian as much as humanly possible.
Okay.
And because it was also the bicentennial of Australia. It was actually the bicentennial of Australia Day. And that was actually the year this was made, 1988. Was actually the 200th anniversary of the founding of Australia. So it was it just everything was so patriotic at this time, and we had Bob Hawke, who was the Prime Minister, and he was the Australian larrikin, and all this sort of stuff. It was also the time when they were, although they never went through with it, when they were supposedly going to make the treaty between Aboriginal Australia and everybody else, but it never actually happened. It was a time when Australia was trying to say to the world, look at us, look at us. Because I think before the 1980s, Australians had felt that they were a forgotten country. No one knew who we were. No one knew what we were about. And the 80s, we pushed so hard. The problem is we pushed so hard, we sent really stupid messages off. This was the time of Paul Hogan, remember, and Crocodile Dundee and all these movies that were being made. So it was all part of this sort of culture, which luckily doesn't really exist anymore, thank God. But it was, I mean, some of it does. We go crazy on Australia Day. We still try.
Well, the last scene of this movie is very patriotic towards Australia. I mean, you do see a guy waving the Australia flag, and they're touting Tasmania, and I mean, there's a lot of Australian pride in the very last scene of this movie, and I think it's actually really nicely done, because they're not doing it in a hard, like us or we'll kick your ass kind of way, or we're the best and everybody else pissed off. It's very friendly, very fun. I mean, they're having a concert. Everybody's dancing and listening to music, and they're drinking beer. I mean, it's really nicely done, actually. I really enjoy the last scene of this movie, even as a non-Australian. I'm like, oh, that's a nice scene. And, you can tell they're really happy and they're proud of their country. And, in this movie, obviously the fictional character of the Australian Albert Einstein inventing the foamy beer, because he knows how to split the beer at him, and they're touting like, oh, look what we've invented, and look at
I know.
But I mean, but the overall message is, it's a very patriotic action towards the end. It's really cute, actually. I like it.
Well, it was also part of this idea that there was this notion that beer was the Australian national drink. That everybody lived on beer. All we consumed was beer, and we're the reality of Australia. What's the most popular alcoholic drink in Australia? It's wine. We all drink wine. We do drink a lot of beer, but we don't drink any more beer than America does or than Canada does. You know what I mean? When we sit down and have dinner, we don't drink beer. We drink wine, So, it was this time where we just sort of thought, we had to push almost these phony values, that didn't really exist. Paul Hogan, when he did that famous advert, come over, I'll throw another shrimp on the barbie, and even that was ridiculous, because we don't even call them shrimps. In Australia, they're called prawns. So it was a crazy time. It was an absolutely crazy time. But there's some interesting stuff though. Did you know, for instance, that Yahoo Serious sued Yahoo?
Yes, I actually vaguely remember that when it was happening, that he tried to sue Yahoo.com for copyright infringement, but he actually lost that case. He did actually lose that case, obviously.
Well, they said that basically Yahoo the business, Yahoo.com, weren't taking business away from Yahoo Serious. So therefore it wasn't actually a breach of copyright, was the way it went. But the making of this film in itself, this is a story to be told. Because this was obviously his first film. As you said, he would go on to make 2 more. But he had no money. Right? No money. He sold his possessions. He sold his car. He sold everything he had to try to fund this. For instance, all the camera equipment was all borrowed. Okay. They called in favors from people, and to borrow equipment, use it, take it back the next day. His mother did all the catering on set.
Oh, wow.
Right, it was actually done by his mother, because they couldn't afford caterers. And in the end, they were able to shoot a certain percentage of the movie. And then, because it was sort of seen as very Australiana, he actually then went to the Australian Film Commission, which is a government body which gives government funding to Australian films. And they presented what they'd already shot, and he actually got 50% of the film funded by the Australian Film Corporation.
Oh, wow, cool.
But that was still not enough to make the movie. So what he then did is he then took what they'd shot with the money in the bank from the Australian Film Corporation, then approached an American film company and said, we're 50% funded, we've shot 30% of footage, will you fund the rest? And because he had the money in the bank from the Australian Film Corporation, they thought that he was a sound investment, so they funded the rest of the film.
Oh, wow.
And that's the way he got it made.
That was a lot of work. That was a lot of work. It is so hard to make a movie.
I know. And the movie did actually make money. It did actually make money. It returned about a 2-to-1 profit. I can't remember exactly what it cost, but they pretty much got $2 back for every dollar invested. So everyone who invested in the movie was actually quite happy. The problem is that these following movies, like for instance, Reckless Kelly, which would follow, was not really so successful. I think one of the reasons for it is that everyone in Australia may know who Ned Kelly was. I think you'd be hard pushed to find Americans who have ever heard of a person called Ned Kelly.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with him either.
No,
yeah.
and that's the thing. I mean, Ned Kelly was the Australian bushranger, is what we call him, what you would call, I don't know, a gunman or something, like, what would you call Jesse James?
We would call that an outlaw.
An outlaw. Okay. So anyway, he was an outlaw, and we call it bushranger. Anyway. Which is also what we call the Australian Army calls their attack helicopters now, bushrangers, after Ned Kelly. Anyways, a little bit of trivia for you. So he made this movie, and the reason why Ned Kelly was very famous was that he and his gang wore armor. They actually made armored suits, so when they confronted the police couldn't shoot them because they were wearing armor. And so he wrote himself into Australian history for doing this. But the thing is, outside of Australia, who's heard of him? And the problem was that Reckless Kelly did the same thing to Ned Kelly that he'd done to Albert Einstein.
And if you don't know who the fuck Ned Kelly is, you're not going to get any of the fucking jokes. Or
that's exactly right. And this was the problem that so it just didn't sell because, like, who the fuck is Ned Kelly? Nobody knew. Everyone knew who Albert Einstein was. So and so unfortunately it just didn't work. Even though it's not a bad little film actually, Reckless Kelly, but it's, I mean, if you enjoyed Young Einstein, you'll enjoy Reckless Kelly. But I would suggest hop on Wikipedia first and find out who Ned Kelly was, and then the story will make sense. If you go into watching the movie without knowing who this outlaw Ned Kelly was, it's like, what the fuck? Why is he walking around with a rubbish bin on his head? Right? It doesn't make any sense. Okay.
And he made a third movie and final movie in 2000 that I didn't even know about this until literally this week when I was like, hey, let's do Young Einstein. And I went and looked him up and I'm like, oh, Yahoo Serious made 3 films. I only knew of 2. So, yeah, that tells you how well the third film did.
Yes. Unfortunately, Young Einstein was bit of a one-hit wonder. It worked for him, and then he tried to repeat it, and unfortunately that just wasn't going to be, you know, which was a shame, you know, because I think he was quite a talented guy. Is, you know, a talented guy, but he just, the problem was he only had one character to play. And that was Yahoo Serious. And that was the problem. So as a comedian, he didn't really have any ability to do anything different. And I think that's, you know, where the whole thing sort of fell apart. You know,
absolutely.
Although it is interesting that in The Simpsons, Yahoo Serious is referenced. So he obviously got a bit of, you know, Americans obviously have some idea who he was because he was referenced in The Simpsons. So there you go.
Yeah, actually, I've seen him referenced in stuff here and there. So yeah, he's definitely one of those 80s pop culture, not quite an icon, but he definitely has some kind of pop culture status because any 80s kid remembers Yahoo Serious for young Einstein.
Yes. And the other thing that should be pointed out too is that you were talking about the music in this film. It is an amazing insight into, because every bit of music in this movie is Australian. They didn't use any like bands from Britain or America or, you know, China or wherever. They only used Australian bands. So it's actually a really interesting insight too into what Australian music sounded like in the late 1980s. So it's a time capsule in its sense just for that, just for the music. Yeah.
Yeah, and I love the soundtrack. The soundtrack's great.
Oh, and there will be songs, I guarantee you, if you're not Australian, you'll hear in that soundtrack, and you will have never have heard that song before. Because, you know, like people like Paul Kelly and that, huge in Australia, no one knows who the fuck Paul Kelly is in America.
Nope.
You know, so you know, so you know, this is the thing, you know. So, probably about the only band that was in the soundtrack that people probably may have heard, if they're overseas, would have been Icehouse, who actually do the theme music, which was the song "Great Southern Land," which was chosen, as the theme music. People probably will have heard of Icehouse, but apart from that, I don't think you will have heard of any of them. No, truthfully. So it's a good little time capsule there.
Yeah, it's a very cute movie. It's worth checking out. This is definitely one I can rate moderately high.
Yes. So I just actually, I was going to ask you, actually, Velvet, I mean, how much Australian cinema, before you met me, had you actually seen?
Honestly, not a lot. And it's not because I don't want to. It's honestly, there's not many times over here we're introduced to a lot of Australian cinema. It's really something you have to seek out, to be honest. Because when I was thinking, God, what have I seen that is, you know, an Australian film? And I'm like, because even a lot of our popular Hollywood actors are Australian, but 90% of the stuff you see them and you forget they're fucking Australian because they always speak with an American accent.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Right. Like I totally forgot Eric Bana was Australian because I can't remember the last time I've seen him in something in America where he was speaking with an Australian accent.
I don't think he ever, apart from being interviewed on a Tonight Show or something, you won't hear him speak with an Australian accent.
No, like every once in a while I've seen him in stuff where he speaks with an English accent, but yeah, like I totally forgot he was even Australian. And there's quite a few actors where every once in a while when it gets mentioned, I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Like, because they become such a part of our culture, you think they're American.
Yes. I mean, there are some who were a little bit different. I mean, Hugh Jackman is a little bit different because he has been in big budget Australian movies that did sell overseas, so you will hear him with an Australian accent. Nicole Kidman is probably another example of that. But everybody else, as soon as they go overseas, on goes the American accent. You know, they don't use their Australian accents, which is kind of a shame because so many British actors, when they come to America, still use their British accents.
You know, and it's I don't know if it's just that they're playing the game. You know what I mean? Because America's a place where if you have an American accent, obviously you're in the club, you're good to go. If you have an English accent, depends on your English accent, we might accept you. And I think, unfortunately, Australian accents, for some reason, it's one of those where Hollywood's kind of like, if they're playing an Australian character in the movie, yes. Other than that, we need you to speak either English or American English. You can pick one of those two. Because actually, there's the Reckless Kelly. That I've seen bits and pieces of that movie with Yahoo Serious, and there's actually a scene in the movie where they're saying, "Hey, we want to put you in this movie, but we need you to speak with an American accent."
Yes, yeah, that's quite true.
I mean, that might be just part of that Hollywood culture for some reason, that they're kind of like, I think it's an unspoken rule that, okay, unless you're playing an Australian character, you can choose from British English or American English. Those are your choices if you want to be in this movie. Like, that's what it seems to be.
Well, one thing Australian actors I mean, look, we've got some actors who come through the line of, celebrity through soap opera and that sort of thing. But most of our actors, unlike, I'm just going to say this, and I hope no one takes this as offence, but most Australian actors come through the theatre. Okay. They don't go directly into movies. They do the hard yards first in theatre. Start to become established, and then they move on to cinema. It's not they don't start their careers in cinema. Now, some of them who will go directly into TV, well, okay, there's always the exceptions, right? A lot of British fans will know Neighbours, obviously, but most of them, go through the theatre. And the other thing too is that the vast majority of Australian actors are all professionally trained. They don't. Okay, so the idea is, in Australia, you don't become an actor to become famous. You become famous by the fact that if you become really popular. So there's not that idea that you want to be an actor to be famous. You want to become an actor because you love acting. And so all of them go through school. And in fact, like two of the big schools in Australia, NIDA and Surrey Hills, these schools, part of the thing that you learn there, one of the subjects that you do there when you're there is accents. It's a compulsory part of your training. And so what happens is that all these Australians who go, like even Mel Gibson was a NIDA graduate. So when you actually come out of that school, if you go for a role and they say, right, we want you to be American, or we want you to be South African, or we want you to be British, bang, they just clip their fingers and they're straight into it. Now, it is true it'll be a generic style accent, okay, I'm not, okay, but they're all trained in it.
Right. Totally. No, that's cool. That's a really cool skill to have, especially if you do want to be a serious actor. That gives you definitely more range.
Oh, and I think it's one reason why they've been so successful in the United States.
Totally.
Because they can just literally turn up and it's like, oh, you want me to be American? Yeah, no problems. Yeah,
right, exactly. Yeah. No, absolutely. I agree. Totally. I mean, some of the most popular actors are Australians in America.
Well, I remember, trying to think now, the very famous American, actor, and I just can't think of his name. Star of the original Independence Day. Getting jiggy with
Will Smith.
Will Smith, right? I remember seeing Will Smith being interviewed on a talk show once, and he was talking about Hollywood and all the rest of it. And they brought up the idea of an Australian director. I can't quite remember who it was, and he just looks at the camera and goes, "Oh God, that's really what we need. More Australians in Hollywood." Because there is this argument that Australians are just starting to swamp Hollywood. And it's not, and the problem is not.
The same thing has been said about people from England as well. They also say English and Australians are taking over Hollywood.
Yes, funny I know.
Yeah. See, we love the accents. We love the attitudes. We love the culture.
And but the thing is, it's not just the actors; it's also the directors, the cameramen, the sound.
I've heard that.
They reckon you cannot walk onto an American film set without hearing British and Australian accents.
Yes.
So it's kind of funny, But
totally
funny.
But
then again, it sort of makes sense because Hollywood may be the home of the American film industry, but the American film industry is not the American film industry anymore. It's more than that. It's actually now the international home of film. Do you know, in many ways, you know, it's not just American. It sort of belongs to everybody now in a sense, you know, and
yeah, totally.
Yeah. So that, I think that's the thing. It's sort of quite different. Sorry. I just had some weird noises going through my headphones there. Sorry. I don't know what that was. What do they say? Ghost in the machine.
That was probably me sending you a message.
Oh, is that what it was? Okay.
I definitely, I really enjoyed checking out the Australian cinema this week. I would definitely love to do more of this in the future. Like, I think we've done a really good eclectic mix of our episodes of really going international and stepping outside of not only just the English speaking cinema, but, you know, we try to like branch out and check out different countries that are not so European centric, and I can see us branching out more in the future towards that. But yeah, definitely want to do more Australian cinema. So Young Einstein from Yahoo series of 1988. You gotta check it out if you like 80s pop culture and you like music and you like something that's a laugh a minute, because this movie, every scene is either something funny or something weird. So on a scale of 5 Eric Roberts, I'm going to go ahead and give this a 4 Erics out of a possible 5 Eric Roberts, because it's a really unique movie and it really is kind of a time capsule. It's so cult. You just got to check it out.
Oh, look, I do agree, but I'm not going to go anywhere near that high, to be honest. I'm going to give it 2.5 Erics.
Okay.
2.5, still a passing grade, but two and a half.
No, and also I think it's novel for me because it is, you know, Australian. Whereas, you know, if there was like if some American asshole did this movie, I don't think it would be nearly as charming and entertaining for me. But, you know, obviously this is a foreign film as an American, and it just has that certain charm because of that.
Yes, and look, and I know, guys, that I'll just do it really quickly because I know we've got to wrap up, but I know, guys, we're going to have people write in and all the rest of it sort of say, my God, you did an Australian episode. You didn't do Picnic at Hanging Rock, one of the most iconic Australian films. You didn't do Mad Max. You didn't do Razorback, the giant pig. You know, you didn't do, you didn't do Orly. You didn't do Gallipoli. You didn't do all. I know we just had to choose 3, and we thought we'd choose 3, which were not necessarily the most mainstream movies you were going to find. So that was the reason why.
Right.
Yeah, no.
And plus, it's just the beginning of the year. We can always do more Australian cinema. I mean, it doesn't all have to be in this one episode. And, so be patient, people. Be patient.
The other thing, we are going to do a 4th of July special when it comes up. So don't worry, America. You know, let's say don't worry, America. 90% of the movies we do are yours, so you don't have to worry. But we will be doing a 4th of July special. We are hoping to do a St. George's Day special for just British movies. I also thought it might be good to do a Canada, because I know we've got a lot of Canadian listeners.
Oh, yeah,
to do a Canada Day special, because they make a ton of great stuff, which a lot of people overseas think is American when it's not.
Yes.
We will do a Canada Day special as well. And if you're from another country, as in, you know, maybe Germany or Holland or Sweden or somewhere, and you would like us to do a special on your country, let us know. Okay?
Yeah, definitely.
Let us know.
Yeah, so you can always tweet us, or you can you can tweet us, you can private message us, or you can email us. So you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Cult Movie Show. Excuse me. You can follow me, Velvet Rose, on my Twitter at OMG, it's Velvet. You can follow my co-host, Warren, here at Martini Super Dry. So feel free to tweet us any movie recommendations you have, or how you like the episodes and what you like about them, all that stuff. Like, so you can email us at cultmovieshow@gmail.com if you have any requests for movie reviews. And what else am I missing? We have a Facebook page. I always forget to mention the Facebook.
Yeah, but don't seriously, unless you just want to use it to find out when the shows are uploaded. That's about all that's on the Facebook page. We don't interact with anybody on Facebook or anything like that. It just simply has the links to the show. If you want to interact with us, go to Twitter. If you don't have Twitter, just get a Twitter account. I mean, hey, just or email us if you want to do it that way.
Yeah.
Also,
exactly.
we're on YouTube as well if you prefer YouTube to iTunes.
Yes.
So we are. That's simply just the Cult Movie Show at YouTube. Pretty straightforward. And I think that's it. And we've gone way over time as usual. But I hope everybody enjoyed the show.
Yeah, totally.
It was a bit of a fun one.
It was a good one.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
It was a bit of fun.
Totally.
We will be back, of course, next week. No idea what we're going to be doing, but Velvet and I will talk about that during the week.
Right.
And we'll have some other great cult classics. Well, I won't say great, but we'll have some cult classics for you next week. So I think that's it. That's a wrap, isn't it?
That's it. That is a wrap. Okay, we'll see everybody next week, and we'll tweet you later.
And I suppose I should just say, seeing it's the Australia Day special, beauty bonza, mate. We'll see you again next Arvo. And I'll finish off by saying, cheers, Cobber. Talk to you soon.